2018 meeting of the Undergraduate Education Advisory Committee. My name is Ann Kennemer. I'm at Texas A&M University, and I am one of the committee co-chairs representing the four-year institutions, and I am joined by Colleen. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Colleen Smith, and I'm from Collin College, the other co-chair along with A&M.
And we've got what we think will be a good agenda today, a lot of information items, I think some good presentations that are forthcoming, and hopefully that will generate some discussion, maybe help us target some activities that we'd like to focus on during this academic year. As we get started, we have a lot of familiar faces in the room, we have some new faces in the room, and so I thought that it would be worthwhile to just kind of go around our group and do introductions. Let's see, Reinhold, do you want to get us started on that?
Sure. I'm Reinhold Cornelius. I'm Assistant Director at for universities and health-related institutions at the Workforce and Academic Affairs and Research Division at the Coordinating Board. And I'm the liaison to this advisory committee.
Good morning, I'm Melinda Valdez. I work alongside Dr. Cornelius in the Workforce, Academic Affairs, and Research Department, and assist him obviously here in this capacity as one of my duties. Welcome.
I'm Fred Hills, Dean of Arts and Sciences at McLennan Community College.
Good morning, I'm Barbara Lerner, Associate Provost for Undergraduate Studies and Academic Partnerships at Texas Woman's University.
I'm Nancy Martin, University of Texas at San Antonio, Associate Vice Provost for the Core Curriculum and the QEP.
I'm Steve Daniel. I'm the Dean of the School of Arts and Letters at Texas Wesleyan University in Fort Worth.
I'm Emily Wilson. I'm the Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs in the Texas A&M Health Science Center, now part of Texas A&M University.
I'm Kathy Wetzel, and I'm Dean of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math at Amarillo College.
Van Wigington, Provost, San Jacinto College Central.
Juanita Flint, Brookhaven College, and I am the Executive Dean of Health and Human Services.
I'm Brett Millan. I'm Associate Professor of English, formerly the Associate Dean for Distance Learning, and I'm currently assigned to the Office of the Vice President of Academic Affairs.
Morning, I'm Beth Brunt Chavez. I'm at the University of Texas at El Paso, and I am an Associate Dean of Rhetoric and Writing Studies, Professor. And then I am also a Senior Associate Dean of Extended University.
I'm Reginald Bell. I'm Professor of Business Communication at Prairie View A&M University, and I'm also co-author of Managerial Communication. Just came out September this year, so if you know anyone who teaches managerial communication, think about me.
I'm John Baines. I'm the non-voting student member to the committee, and I'm at the University of Texas at Austin.
Good morning. I'm Melissa Armitar, and I'm the Dean of Instruction at Lamar Institute of Technology.
Good morning. I'm Debbie Cottrell, Vice President for Academic Affairs at Texas Lutheran University, one of the private institution representatives to this committee.
Good morning, Kristen Croyle from UT Pan American. I'm the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education and the Dean of the University College.
I'm Rebecca Boone. I'm a history professor at Lamar University.
Hi, I'm Larry Abram. I'm Associate Dean of the School of Undergraduate Studies at the University of Texas at Austin.
Thank you, everybody. A couple of housekeeping items as we get started. Let's introduce our guests who are seated towards the back. If you would stand up and just kind of give us a brief introduction of who you are.
Good morning. I'm actually Stacy Silverman.
First, have the articulation.
So now the housekeeping items. Let's see, if you need them, facilities are across the hall about midway between the front and the back of the building. If we should have to evacuate the building for some type of emergency, go to the hallway, go left, go right, whichever way is open, and you can get outside. And just as a reminder, under the Texas Open Records Act, this meeting is being live streamed over the web, and so just use caution in what you say, lest somebody be recording you. It also may be wise for you to turn your microphone off unless you are speaking to the group, and so just be mindful of the little light, whether it's on or not, and that will prevent anybody from picking up side conversations that you may have. Let's see, Reinhold, did you have anything else we needed to talk about?
Microphone. No, except also welcome to be here, that you're here with us, and thank you for coming. With that, I would like to go right away to the agenda item 2. If you haven't picked it up, there are materials on the table where the sign-in sheet is. Agenda item 2 is consideration of the summary notes from the last meeting on March 28th of this year. And we emailed you the notes ahead of time. I hope you had a chance to look at it. At the last meeting, you discussed and considered issues about the core curriculum, and we will revisit that during the meeting again. And then you discussed and considered a report on the 60 semester credit hour for 2-year degrees. And you discuss future projects and topics, some of which we will be looking at today. And at this point, I also can report that your chair, Ann Kannemer, did present the 60 semester credit hour report and the business of the Ueac to the cause meeting, the committee meeting of the board last June.
Are there any suggested changes to the notes from the March 28th meeting? Yes, if not, would somebody like to move approval?
I move we approve the minutes.
Motion by Fred and a second by Larry. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. And that motion carries. Thank you very much.
Can we ask questions on the minutes now after, some follow-up information? I'm just curious what happened on we were going to talk about a meeting between the Learning Technology Advisory Committees and the Graduate Education Advisory Committees over the summer, and didn't hear anything else. What happened on that?
Yeah, I will report on that under agenda item 3 later on.
Okay, thanks.
And I understand, Reinhold, you were suggesting that in consideration of some of the people who have joined us to provide presentations today, that we might hold agenda item 3 until our lunch break. Is that correct? Was there anything that you wanted to talk about at this point?
No, I suggested we do that because it is just an update and discussion. You don't have to consider anything, and that's convenient to do if we run out of time while we have the box lunches. And if we don't run out of time, we can do it beforehand. But we have our speaker here for agenda item 4, and so I would like to go to agenda item 4 and start that, so we have plenty of time with that. And that is the discussion of reverse transfer agreement, and we invited Dr. David Burris from Sam Houston State University to come talk to us. Staff heard that they have a very well working system, and so we thought it might be good to have him talk about it and maybe come up with best practices or other ideas the committee here can do about this issue. And I'll invite Dr. Burris to come here to talk. And
thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay. Please feel comfortable to stop me and ask questions as we're going along. I'm going to try to dump a lot of information in a short period of time. We will restrict it just to the reverse transfer as requested. If you just take a look at page 2 of the thing real quick, we've been doing reverse transfer since 2002 at Sam Houston. Not a lot of people or colleges were involved in it in the early years. That's expanded quite a bit. Thank you. If you look in the left-hand column, you've got the college name, of course, and next to it is the residence hour requirement. And the residence hour requirement does have an effect on the number of transcripts that are available to a college for evaluation any given year. We found that we had to go to a system where we provide college registrars the chance to do a reverse transfer spring and fall if we're going to catch all the students. Otherwise, you miss some out of the loop, and the college registrars prefer to do it in that particular fashion. Of course, the right-hand column is what was the exact number of students that the colleges were told that we had available in terms of transcripts to consider for a reverse transfer this year. The success rate, if you flip to the next page right there, the next page for the success rate on the thing, success rates are currently very good. For the filter that we use, they typically are between 95 and 100%. Now, they don't always graduate them in one semester, and I probably need to qualify that somewhat. There are probably things that happen in reverse transfer that the board may not be aware of. So, for example, you consider probably that there's an associate degree awarded at some point. What many of the colleges, first off, they don't report back to us, almost very few of them report back to us what their success rates are in exact numbers. Enough of them do that I have a good feel for it, though. So they do things that I had never anticipated. So, for example, I had one college this year that reported back that they selected 10 of the students that we had in the filter, they awarded 15 degrees because they'll give the Associate of Arts and the Associate of Science. They like the transcripts on here. The numbers are misleading, like if you're looking at Lone Star College, the top of the page, 1,397. In any given semester, I really don't expect more than about a third to a half of those to result in degrees. And then one of the reasons the colleges don't report the things back to us is our filter only sends back to them college students who have not got an associate degree on record. So they might qualify for an Associate of Arts this semester, but if they get the transcript in a future semester, it might qualify for an Associate of Science at the same time. Now, that sounds pretty good. It's also bad. Our low end is 0. Example of that would be Dallas County Community College District. We've sent them transcripts for about 3 or 4 straight years, and they never had anybody graduate. The reason that would be is while they are a multi-college system, they only sent our transcripts to one college to look at, and if that one college didn't pick them up, after a while, it's just not worth their effort, so they dropped out of the deal, which would lead me to make one suggestion. Reverse transfer, if you really want it to work, has to be done at the system level. It should not be done at the individual college level within the system. When you do that, you run into problems that are just seem to be insurmountable for getting things done. Next page, reverse transfer success rates for 2011. Again, we go from 90% to 100 right there, as I've just said. Most colleges did not participate in reverse transfer when we started in the early 2000s. It wasn't until after the closing the gaps that effort started up that we started seeing most colleges want to participate in it. Now most colleges do want to participate. Of the numbers I gave you on the second page there showing the number of the colleges and the transcripts that are available, over 90% of those will participate. In any given year, I can't tell you the exact numbers. Some of them come in and out on a given year because of problems they're having on their system. But that's over 90% of them will participate. I've already sent out over 2,000 transcripts to the colleges this semester for their consideration. Our probably best known success by far would have to be Blinn College. They were the first one that we really got started with, them and Lone Star, but Blinn was the one that shone. Over 4 consecutive years, they exceeded 20% increase in their associate degree award rate. Now, the registrar at that time was a man by the name of Dennis Krausen. He left. He's back there now, but in another capacity other than registrar. Now, probably what you need to know in order to really see what the potential success is, they increased their associate degree award rate by over 20% for 4 consecutive years, but only 7% of their transfer students come to Sam Houston because of their location and their relationship with A&M. About 85% of their transfer students go to A&M, 7% to Sam Houston, 7% to San Marcos, and that only leaves about 1% for everybody else. But 7% of transfer students increase your award rate by over 20% for 4. It's sustainable is one of the things I want to mention. Once you get the thing set up and running, if you got a 15% increase this year from a particular university, you can expect to get that increasing slightly as the numbers go up each year as you work on the thing. Our worst success rate would be a school to our south, a college district to our south. We sent them over 4,000 transcripts in a 5-year period. They graduated 40 students by reverse transfer. Now, you're probably going to say, how in the world can that be? And they wanted to do reverse transfer degrees. And this is probably some of the problems the board needs to be aware of if you're not aware of it. The colleges have a real problem, or several real problems. Almost all of them are associated with processing things electronically. First off, they could get the speedy transcripts using the free speedy software or EDI software that come with the system. But in order to process the transcripts, the first thing they did was printed them on paper. This is a college district that's approaching 100,000 students, okay? They printed them on paper. They then sorted them by college, to which college they thought within the district they thought had the most students for that on that transcript. Then they were supposed to go out to the individual colleges for evaluation. Well, once they get to the individual colleges, you're still in trouble, because how do I associate the transcript with our transcript? There is no standardized way I'm aware of, or anybody I know of is aware of, to associate transcripts from universities, particularly when they come through EDI, with a student at that particular college. You're talking about a massive job for the colleges to make that association. As an example, our registrar a couple of weeks ago had to cut off transcripts. On our system, we have a spot where students can click a college or university they want to send a transcript to, and it's done automatically. They don't have to go to the registrar's office. Most of you have that same kind of feature. They had to cut it off temporarily for Lone Star College because the registrar's office at Lone Star College, when the students would go down there, would tell them, well, Sam Houston never sent the transcript. And in fact, we'd sent it several times. We finally got our IT staffs together, and basically what happened is Lone Star College, the way they try to identify them and associate them is they want Social Security numbers. Well, we're on the Banner system. If you're on the Banner system fights you on Social Security numbers. So there's really nothing in the transcript that really makes it convenient. It overloads the colleges. They're on an information overload, their registrar's offices. Now, We have a lot of colleges, you'll notice on that first page, we send 50 or 60 transcripts or 100 to. Up to about 100, that's where we have the highest success rate because it's a small volume. When you start sending 500 and 1,000 transcripts, that college district doesn't have a chance. So smaller college districts, I would suspect, if I was to look at your numbers, have a higher percentage or a higher success rate than the large college districts do, like Dallas County and Lone Star and so on. It's just a very difficult thing for them to handle. There has been a real effort to meet the closing the gaps. In fact, we've had to help some college districts out in their efforts to get things into the system and award degrees. They awarded them with the idea that they'd come back and enter the transcript information by hand at a later date. Most of the college districts cannot import speedy transcripts directly into their transcript system. So they have to enter them by hand. That's, of course, another labor-intensive, time-consuming process and difficult. It's a tremendous difficulty for them. So they awarded the short story. They awarded the associate degrees. A couple of years later, they realized we're coming up on a SACS deal. Oh, we haven't got those entered, and we've forgotten. Can you help us out by pulling the transcripts you would have sent us during this time period? So there is a real effort by the colleges to award the degrees, but they have some hard things to overcome. The next page I've given you, it says transcript identifying information. For reverse transfer, since the early 2000s, we have supplied in addition to the transcripts, we supply a spreadsheet. And I would say that for the colleges to be successful, this is an absolutely essential piece of information. The spreadsheet, if you look across it, I've put all the fields that we have in there, but a couple of them are really important. So, for example, our largest trading partner is Lone Star College. The only way they can make the association is Social Security number. We include the Social Security number with all of the colleges on the list, and that's the only reasonable way they have of being able to make that association. Lone Star, for example, right now the deal with the registrar, yes, it's in their system, but there's no Social Security number on things that are just sent individually, so it goes into a backlog where they have to wait for a human. But even if without Social Security numbers, the best their software at any of the systems can do, including Sam Houston's, is narrow it down to a range, and then you still have to go in and do it by hand. So we have ourselves into a legislative situation where we cannot do the thing electronically. We have to have hands-on touch for every transcript and student, basically, that goes through the system, and that really hurts. We supply a number of things in there that help the registrars to reduce the amount of time that they have. It's got the GPA from the transfer institution, our GPA, total number of hours from the transfer, total number of and so on down the line. One of the most important fields in there, and you may not have suspected, the student's email address. I know that most of the universities and colleges in the state are very fortunate. Their students update their contact information every time they move and stuff, and it's 100% correct. At Sam Houston, our students never do that, but the one way you're guaranteed is their university email account because we require everything go through it. So this is the way that we give them, that the registrars at the colleges can contact the student if they wish to in the process. It's an absolutely essential thing. Students want the associate degree. When we first started this program in 2002, 2003, we assumed that if they were getting the bachelor's degree, there wouldn't be that much interest. We were wrong, dead wrong. They really want it. The catch is they don't want to have to do anything to get it, and they don't want any more runaround from the administrations of our respective institutions. So it's almost got to be automated for them to be willing to do it. Somebody's going to, at some point here, ask me how we get away with this legally. I get hit with this all the time, FERPA and so on down the line. We are very fortunate that our systems attorney basically came up with the following ruling for us after thinking about it for a long time. Basically, if he says FERPA and other things like that were meant to protect students from abuse. They were not meant to protect them from receiving a desirable service. He says that receiving a degree is a desirable service, and therefore we may do it. We have never had, to my knowledge, a single complaint since we've been doing it about 2002, 2003, not a single complaint from a student. I have not heard a single complaint from a college either. The students do want the degree if you make it available to them to do it. The next page shows our typical, if you will, filter that we use. We've always been ahead of pretty much what the state law has been, and we've been doing this since 2002, actually, as our filter. The first one you'll see there is the college can specify the minimum number of residence hours that they want filtered. So if you look back at the list of colleges, for example, like Blinn, we filter for 21 hours because that's what their residence deal is. If it's 24, we filter for the 24. Most colleges have gone to the minimum of 15 or 16, depending on whether they're 60 or 62-hour degrees. But most of them are on the minimum now. But we filter based on that. Then we look for a combine of hours greater than or equal to 60, 62 if they happen, that's their lower bound. And we then look for core complete, either institution, because it doesn't matter, you're with some few exceptions. We look to see that we don't have an associate degree on file for them at Sam Houston, and they're currently a Sam Houston student. If we do that, I generate an email, which I'll show you in a minute. I send it out to registrars. The first thing we do is we put the spreadsheet out on a secure encrypted server where the college registrar or their designee or designees, I guess, could actually have an account, and they are able to pull that spreadsheet down. From the spreadsheet, they can ask me to send all of the transcripts, or they can ask me to send just select transcripts within the system. And it's worked very well for us for all of these years. If you flip over, I think it's page 8 right there. I'd like to at least point this out. In 2011, 2012, when the real push came on from the coordinating board, et cetera, to award associate degrees, the colleges asked us, what's the effect of our residency requirement going to have on us? Now, this isn't a perfect deal. This is using the 2012 data, but you can look in the columns. There's 15 hours of residence, 18 hours, 21, and 24, and then for the difference between 18 and 24, I put the percent in there of what the effect it would have on them. Some colleges had almost no effect at all. Others, it went as high as 10%. So the residency does affect, and from the college's standpoint, like the ones that are above the minimum, their idea is that we would like to really have our stamp on them as the college before they're allowed to graduate with a degree from our college. And we do that for the colleges when they need it. Okay, the next page, I believe it's page 9, at least it is on mine. This is, I guess before I hit this page, I'd like to mention one other keep your finger on that page, page 9. If you flip down to page 20, it's just about the next to last page. Because I contact the college registrars every fall and spring semester, TCCIA asked me to generate a list of college contacts for them. And we publish this on a website. If you flip down through it, you'll see my contact and also the TCCIA contact for doing it, but it's always out there on the web.
Now, it begins on page 22.
22?
See a lot of you. There we go.
Okay. The colleges would really like to see the universities have a specific contact that they can get to add to this list. I've never been very successful in that. There may be such a list, I just don't know where to find it, but the colleges would really like to have a contact person at each of the universities that they could call to ask questions if they have one. Okay, I'm going to flip back to page 9 there. There are a number of inconsistencies within the colleges that are worth looking at. One of them that I've already mentioned is some colleges confer both an AA and an AS degree. Many colleges actually go beyond that, not many that I know of, but I know a few go beyond that, and they use them to finish out certificate programs and stuff like that. Blinn College, the first one that really got into it with us, they led the path on this. They always asked us, at that time, their residence requirement was 24 hours, but they wanted everything from 30 hours, because what they did is between the 24 and 30, they looked for people that were within 12 hours of graduation. They used our email contact to contact those students, say, these are the courses you're missing, take them at Blinn, where you're at, or anywhere, and we'll award you the associate degree. They apparently had a pretty good feedback by doing it that way. Now, that worked the registrar to death. I think that's why he stepped down after doing that for about 4 or 5 years, or at least part of the reason for doing it. But that does work. It's an effective way of doing it. And when they sent out those notices from the colleges, the people responded. It was a positive deal. Okay. I guess I'll go with the list I gave you. I've updated mine, but I'll go with yours. The number one on there, the other one that's worth doing on inconsistencies. Most colleges in the state, if they're going to award an associate degree, contact the student. And in fact, many of them are very adamant. If I can't contact the student and ask them if they want it, they will not award the degree. The other end of the extreme is there are colleges who say they qualify. Whether we can contact them or not, they award the associate degree. So you have both extremes. The majority of colleges, I believe, contact, but you do have both extremes. Okay, all colleges, if they're going to be successful, have got to come up with a way to receive the transcripts electronically. By law, every college is supposed to be on the EDI system. That's the law. We're close, but it's not there. If they can receive, they may not be able to send. That needs to be connected to the high schools at this particular point in time to make it work out as well. It's not enough to be able to receive the EDI transcripts, though, because then they print them off, they enter the things by hand. You've got to be able to import the things into your transcript system, period. If you can't do that, you can't handle the volume. There's just no way to do it. Once they're into your transcript system, you need an electronic way of processing the transcripts. Now, everybody that I'm aware of will not just be satisfied with the electronic processing saying you're qualified or not. They all want to go in and verify that the things actually match up on their system. But there are still impediments within the system even after you get that far. And then, of course, they're going to award it. They have to enter the information by hand. That's got to be eliminated. It really does. Other impediments that I observe with the colleges that we work with, and I work with over 40 colleges on doing this kind of thing, there are still colleges where the things are printed off, they're given to an evaluator, the evaluator evaluates it. Here's a course that would substitute for this English. It's not our exact number, but it certainly meets the need. They have to go see an academic dean on a per-student basis to get permission to make that substitution. And they say it feels, we're all humans. They say it kind of depends on what the academic dean does today. One day they accept it for one student, maybe not the next day for another. That is also part of the reason I say if you really want to be successful, it has to be done at the district level in the college, not at the individual institution. It puts, okay, enough. One of the biggest things that you could do is if you came up with a way to assure that all EDI transcripts had some identifying number. Social Security, I know that the THECB has talked about having a number for every student in the state that goes from grade school through ever. But there needs to be some way where you don't have to use people to make the association. You can take advantage of the computer to say, okay, a transcript came in, here's a student, and there's no question about it. All of us need that, even the universities. Yes, sir.
Reginald Bell. Dr. Boris, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
First question is, are deans perceiving the associate degree for a student who's on the bachelor's degree track as a degree of default when students are not able to perform successfully in the upper division classes? And second question is, why is there such a consternation among registrars to make the process electronically? And do you perceive that they are thinking that it makes it subject to fraud? For example, in the mortgage-backed security cases, when banks just did not do assignment of mortgages, according to 60 Minutes back in 2011, and the assignment of mortgages, the most critical part of the process of purchasing real property. And since they skipped that step, when people who were foreclosed on began to sue back, to countersue, the banks didn't have the paperwork, so they couldn't prove ownership of the property. Therefore, it was a big mess that led to what we all call the mortgage crisis. Are registrars perceiving that not doing this step by hand and doing it electronically could lead to some type of fraud in the system and make the system less manageable?
No, it has nothing to do with fraud or otherwise like that. It's just if I send you, like I sent 1,300 and some transcripts 2 weeks ago to Lone Star, how do you hire enough people to go in and take the transcripts just from Sam Houston, go through their transcript system and look for a name like Smith and narrow it down to the Smith that it belongs to? It's just it's a very difficult thing. It's very expensive for them. It's the reverse is true for the universities. We have the same problem. One of the things I fear the most, in a sense, is I would like to do a better job of filtering so that if they send me an associate degree, I don't send them that transcript the second or third time, although some of them want it that second and third time, looking for an additional degree. But and so far, maybe 2 or 3 colleges a year will want to send us back transcripts to record it. But if Lone Star and Blinn would hit us at about 2,000 transcripts within a 2 or 3 week period, and we had to go through by hand and find that they've been awarded an associate degree and mark it, it would kill us. It would absolutely kill us. It's just, we would be subject to the problem that they have right now. There's no fraud in it. That's not their problem.
But just to follow up on my question, on number 2 on page 9, where you write, at present, many colleges and some universities enter electronic transcripts in their internal transcript system by hand, still widespread. The confusion I'm having is, do we understand why this is done by hand and why there's such a consternation to changing this to a more...
There's no consternation to changing it. It's dollars is what they will tell you. They don't have the software to make the change. So, for example, if PeopleSoft, we're on Banner, but take PeopleSoft as an example. University of Houston is on PeopleSoft. They apparently, well, I've talked to my counterpart there, they can take the EDI transcripts and import them directly. Lone Star College system with 100,000 students still can't do that. And they tell me numbers on dollars they've spent with consultants to get it done that are just unbelievable. One of them told me they had exceeded $200,000 in grant money trying to get that software written. They're honest about what they believe the number is. I don't see how it can get that high, but they're honest about the number and that they believe it. Not sure how y'all would do it either, but if the state had a solution where they supplied the software that would allow the transport of the EDI transcripts into the major systems like PeopleSoft, Banner, and stuff. That would be a really welcome solution. Another part of it is the EDI transcripts are not perfect. So, like, we have to write custom software for every college to import and pick up all the fields that we need, particularly the fields where things are put in as comments and stuff. Every college in the state. And that's not automated. And most college districts do not have the staff to do that. A lot of universities just don't have the staff to do that. So that's a stumbling block. We are not at a point where we're processing things electronically, and I don't see it happening anytime in the near future. Not unless there's a system-wide solution as opposed to individual solutions.
Even with the system-wide, you're going to need a common number to be able to sort.
You do.
I mean, you could probably do it now with a common number and some spreadsheets and move them back and forth. It's a manual process, but until you have a common number that matches, a software solution is secondary from the sounds of it.
What's the sense, maybe from the coordinating board staff here, of the willingness of the state of Texas to really think about, centralizing at least that part of the process? I think it would help in terms of closing the gaps. It probably would help with the completion agenda, overall. So is there a sense, because from what you're describing, if we took care of that, a lot more transcripts would flow back and forth for reverse transfer and articulation agreements, as well as
not just reverse transfer, but the individual students want to send the stuff back. It's not unusual for a student to send an individual transcript to a college or to a university, and it be 1 to 3 months before that transcript is actually available on that system.
Exactly, and we're in the position of, we just purchased Highland software package to help us with kind of importing directly into our systems. But my
even after you get them in, now you have to identify them. You still haven't solved your problem.
They're still right, exactly. So, is there a sense from the staff of is this high enough on the radar of the coordinating board and/or the legislature to really take a look at this, or is this something that, if with a recommendation from us, could be added to the plate? And I'm sorry, and just the potential benefit. I think that's the thing. It isn't going to be an enormous task, and there'll be resources that'll be spent to do this. But again, if the focus is the completion agenda and showing, making this communication so that the 60 and the 120 really do make sense and allow us to track it and facilitate it as much as possible for us, it would take a huge barrier away if we were able to resolve this issue.
I have a question. I'm wondering if the co-board would be willing to perhaps take the written opinion of your attorney about FERPA and share that with colleges and universities. Our college, our school that the most of our students transfer to will not, because of the FERPA issues. Their attorney just cannot see it that way. And I'm wondering if that's something that opinion could be shared across the state.
I am more than willing to state the thing verbally, and I would have loved my systems attorney in 2003 or 4 to put it in writing, but he's an attorney. Now, the way he puts it is, I do not put that kind of thing in writing. I am willing to defend it in court, no problem. He even told me that, I'm not worried about it if I was to lose, which I don't think I will, but if I lost, all they could do is say is cease and desist doing it that particular way, but you're not going to get it in writing. And systems attorneys are a huge barrier for many of the districts.
Maybe we could see if the co-board could have their attorney work on that issue.
Let me make a suggestion. It does sound like there are perhaps some barriers that are of interest to many who are here with us today. What we may want to do is to wrap up Dr. Burris's presentation with trying to identify a few of the most significant barriers and then coming up with a plan of how, as a group, we would like to move forward with some recommendations to the board on things that we think might be helpful in sharing best practice or in trying to overcome some of these barriers. And so let's take some good notes, and we'll come back to a discussion about this in a few minutes. Bruce?
Here's another barrier, since you're going to put it that way. I was hesitant to use that word. Opt in, opt out on the state common app. Throw that thing away. I'll give you an example. When the students read that thing, they think that it's just a privacy deal. And they think that if I do this, it's either going to be privacy or I'm going to get all kinds of emails from my administration, which I don't want to see. I already get enough of those. So they check no. They don't realize that they're eliminating themselves with many districts of being able to get the associate degree. I will not mention the university by name. That would be improper, but let me give you an example. And I had helped this university, Sam Houston had helped this university get started in the business. They were up to sending out a little over 2,000 transcripts a year for a reverse transfer. Their university board, after it came out on the Common App, and talking to their legal department, said, okay, let's use the Common App to determine who will be eligible to send it. The next semester, they dropped below 200. It's an education problem. The universities can't solve it. It'd have to be on the college end, and I don't think the colleges can handle it either. I don't think they stand a chance. I think we'll try page 10. There are the FERPA issue. I have been at colleges where we signed an articulation agreement that goes with all the programs that I have in the back of this that we're not going to discuss today. And I've heard a college president tell their registrar that this is a high priority reverse transfer. We want it done. 2 months later, we start the process, and the college registrar has been to a conference, and they've been told all the things that can happen to them over FERPA violations, and they won't do it. It hits that hard. Okay, let me leave the colleges and talk about the universities a little bit. When we get a transcript from a college, we really don't get much information other than the fact that they have credit for some course. If you were to back up to 2004-2006 time frame, we found that our average student was coming in with about 12 hours of college credit, somewhere in that neighborhood. Today, it's not unusual. In fact, our average would probably be around 40 hours now. It's nothing for students to come in with 40 hours anymore, and with the programs we have, not lose a single hour in the transfer credit. We're quite happy with that particular deal. We prefer to get students with 40 or more hours. It's to our advantage big time. Part of it is we plotted the success rate, meaning graduation rate, versus transfer hours. If you start at 12 and below, the success rate is bad. It's even worse than our incoming freshman class. When they hit about 30 to 35 hours, you'll see the curve goes up, but is relatively flat. When they hit about 30 to 35 hours, it starts to go up. When they hit 40 or more transfer hours, they graduate. So We have about $2 million tied up in transfer scholarships. We ain't got enough money to go around. It's basically the first ones that apply. But we have a tremendous success rate with that group. So we have set it at 45 hours, and we specifically go after that group. Now that's going to have a negative effect on the colleges that I'm not sure that they're aware of yet. The universities used to be thought of as the filter that gave out the bad grades and the people didn't ever complete. Now it's going to be the colleges. The colleges, in addition to all of the other things that they have to put up with, like what was your degrees, that percentage degrees, and I don't think the average college is getting more than about 7 to 10% of their student body to the associate degree. At least they aren't in my area, and I could be very wrong on that, but that's the number I would come up with if I was asked to give a good estimate. The colleges are now going to be, they're going to, what was usually our retention rate at the universities, that problem's going to transfer back to the colleges because of the increase in the college hours that are being transferred. I think that's got to happen. Now, back to the transcripts. Some of the coursework we get is AP, some of it is early college, some of it is dual credit. We have a student who comes in with 40 hours, and that's become almost average. If they come in with 40 hours, they don't want to go through orientation. If you ask them what's going on, oh, I'm a sophomore. I'm a first semester junior. I don't need They need the same services as a first semester freshman because they've never been away from their high school or early college campus, and we have a hard time identifying them, and asking them doesn't work. Another thing that it would be nice if we could identify coming in on the college transcript where the hours were from so that we could give them the services, because we have a large dropout rate in that group that shouldn't be there because of the culture shock of them making the transition from home to the university. The universities also worry about the quality of the transfer work, particularly if it's dual credit. Dual credit, there are some colleges, like San Jacinto has a big program where they use Texas state money to bus students from the high schools to the college. They take it with regular college students, then they bus them back. Others, of course, do it mostly within the local high school district. Sometimes they use their own instructors. Sometimes they use local college or university instructors. We would like to be able to run the statistics to show whether or not the people were successful in a particular program if they went through the math, the history, whatever it is. Now, as many years as we've been doing this, on our legacy system, before we switched to Banner, we could generate those kinds of statistics. We're hoping to do it with Banner, with custom software that we're writing ourselves pretty soon. If you can show a college that there's a problem with anything, the college districts won't tolerate it. They will fix the problem. They are really good at it. But if they don't know it, and you're not showing them in a reasonable fashion, they don't have a chance to fix it. So it would really be helpful to us, and I don't expect that there's any easy solution to this, because your EDI is pretty much a national standard. But that would be a useful thing as far as we're concerned. It also would help us with the advising function. Very good. Number 2 on there is make the electronic automatic in the. Not every college is marking core complete. Sometimes they mark core complete, but they just write it and they don't use the state format. And when they don't use, if it's marked in the state format, we can pick it up electronically and we're in great shape. When it's not, you're depending on some human reading the thing, and it doesn't get done properly all the time. The same thing for an associate degree. Many colleges are not marking on a paper transcript, the associate degree is there, but it's not marked on the electronic transcript, or it is not marked following the state standard for it, and we miss it. Even harder, we are supposed to accept core complete from any state institution, or partial. There's nothing that core complete's a lot easier for us to work, but when it comes in partial, we have a tough time. There are students who are asked to take courses they shouldn't have to take because we didn't know that was part of that particular institution's core. We'd like some way so we can eliminate that problem so that it doesn't exist. But that problem does exist at present. It is relatively easy to map the first 36 to 40 hours of university degrees. We lose more students in the advising probably than anything else. Consider the following. Student transfers to Sam Houston, they're coming in with 40 to 60 hours, let's say 60. They're expecting to graduate in 2 years. Very good. Okay, they're core complete. Okay, they now sign up for the College of Business. Well, every College of Business state has 2 accounting classes, 2 economics classes. They also have 2 or 3 math classes they require. And yes, they're core complete. There's no way in heck they're going to make it, though, because they took the wrong math, they didn't take the accounting, whatever. Helping with the advising function is a really big problem in the state. The students have to have that advising, and they really need to make that decision while they're in the college as to where they're going to go. Otherwise, they're caught. Now it's not going to be 2 years to graduate, it's going to be 3, because it's going to take them 1 year at least to get those back-to-back classes that they have to have. The other part of it is, and this depends on the major, it's very dependent on the major. Most majors, not all, were meant to be taken over the entire time they're at the school, whether it's 4 or 5 years in an engineering degree. Very good. It was not meant that you become core complete and then take all of your major and minor classes in the last 2 years. But the average high school student, and particularly when they're in dual credit and stuff like that, they don't realize that. So they're transferring with a bulk of hours, and now they're coming up, well, if I'm going into engineering, I don't have what I needed. I should have taken real chemistry and physics instead of kitchen chemistry and cowboy physics or whatever. And they're caught. Very good. And it hits them hard. It's hitting them in the pocketbook. It's hitting them in the time to get that degree. They really need to pick their transfer institution while they're at the college or at the high school in the early college or dual credit program and be looking at the transfer to the college. The proper goal for most college students, if they're going into business, the sciences, engineering, fields like that, is to complete as much of the first 2 years of the university degree program. We transfer up to 66 hours on that, so that when they come in, they don't lose an hour. Now, they may not that way complete the associate degree, but they can pick it up with reverse transfer. Whereas if they had done core complete because their college didn't offer that particular class, for example, and that's frequent. So they got core complete. They've now, and maybe even finished the associate degree. They've hurt themselves because now they have to make up that difference when they transfer. And it makes it really hard on the college districts because then they say, well, the college didn't advise me. And maybe the college really did. And maybe we did too, who knows, but it is a problem. Yes.
I have a question. That, as I was listening to you talk about this last point, I was for a while trying to figure out exactly what the relationship of this issue was to the reverse transfer topic, and because it seemed like to a large part what we were saying is students are not being well served in the pursuit of the bachelor's degree if they haven't chosen appropriately in the foundation courses. Am I right in thinking that what you're suggesting is that one of the issues...
It affects all of them, but it is part of that reverse transfer deal because they're wanting to get a degree from the associate and the baccalaureate, but they've missed out because they've gone down what seems to them the best track, frequently without advice. They just start taking the courses.
Right.
And they don't tell their advisors really what their final goal is.
So
There's
I
lots
think,
of reasons.
in the last year or so, this committee has made recommendations about field of study advising that would address some of that. But what I'm wondering is, do you think it's possible that students who ultimately will be part of the reverse transfer process are not being well served by their initial institution because they're being focused on, say, being core complete, or rather than being prepared to transfer and ultimately earn the degree as reverse transfer?
I'm not going to say they weren't well served by the first institution that they went to. They are going to complete the associate degree because of reverse transfer, regardless of how it worked out when they transfer those with those hours. But their final educational goals, no, they're not making them, and it's going to take them extra time and money. In the state of Texas, you can actually get the high school diploma, associate, and baccalaureate in 6 years or less if you know what you're doing and you take advantage of all the state laws that are currently in effect.
So your main point really is about the progress toward the bachelor's degree?
I suppose so. It really is, though, a problem that over 70% of our students are now in the community college system, and we're not meshing as well together as institutions as we need to help them meet their final goals. Okay. Most of the rest of what I have there is repeat stuff. If you want to know, have some feel for what effect you've had on the increase in degrees, if you look at page 12, I pulled some data from 2008, just transcripts that were available, and I'll mention two of them just as an example. Blinn College their requirement at that time was 30 hours of transfer taken at Blinn College. And so if you took 30 hours from Blinn, 30 hours from us, so it would be at least 60 hours on the filter. We were giving them 221 transcripts, and then there are 288 on the next thing. Since they have dropped institutional requirements like extra kinesiology, histories, and stuff like that, and dropped down to 21 hours, we're sending them 425 transcripts now this semester. Lone Star College, back in 2008, they were getting 670. Since they've changed their requirements to come more in line with what Closing the Gaps was wanting to do, they're now getting 1,397 transcripts this semester. So the program itself has had, those numbers I took off page 2, by the way, and 3. You can go pick them up for almost any of the colleges there. Closing the Gaps has had a big effect in the sense of making it available, the associate degree, to a very much larger body of people. I will mention one last one here. If you look at page 20, we tried this for a while. It didn't really work out as well as we would like it to, but we decided to try an educational program for our students that came in with insufficient hours to complete the degree with reverse transfer, and we took it a step further in a sense. What we were doing is everyone who came into Sam Houston that we did not have an associate degree registered for, we sent them a letter tailored to each of the individual colleges. I put the one in there for San Jacinto. It starts about halfway down the page, and it explains what reverse transfer is, because even today the average student has never heard of it, has absolutely no idea what it is. And we sent it out to every student in the university. We did this for 2.5 years. We It's dropped out present for several reasons. Part of it's got to do with the ability for the colleges to actually transfer the things. It was also, I'm the only person at Sam Houston that's on this. It's a quarter-time job for me, and it made it easier for me to do the reverse transfer fall and spring, which was more productive for the colleges. But we might reinstitute it, but it might be something that any university and college might want to consider doing. And I think I probably ought to cut it off there. I've said too much already.
I had a quick question.
Please.
Being new to this committee and a voting member, would you please give me 2 or 3 succinct steps that I could take that you would like for this committee to achieve that would help you out?
Anything that you can do that will help people on systems like PeopleSoft, Banner and stuff, import the transcripts would be great. More important would be a way of associating the university transcript with the college transcript. The majority of colleges today, I would say, if you gave them their choice, they want a Social Security number. Because that's the only way they can really do it. If you come out with that statewide number, fine, that could work too. But even getting and they need to be able to import those transcripts into their system so that they can have some chance of processing them electronically. They have to be able to accomplish those steps to be able to really be successful with reverse transfer. Import the transcripts, get them into a transcript evaluation system, be able to associate the student with the university transcript. And that's why we send that spreadsheet. It's not perfect, but it's the best that we've been able to do.
I have first a comment and then a question. First, as a fellow transfer institution, I want to thank you for synthesizing, I think, the issues surrounding not only reverse transfer but transfer in general. I think this is a marvelous synthesis of that, so thank you for that. One of the things that occurred to me is, listening to you speak, is the importance, which I have found as well, of good communication between the academic side and your registrar's office. A lot of the issues that you've identified, we've been speaking with our registrars about, that we are encouraging them to take to TACRO and talk about in that venue as well as in this one, particularly the issues of transcription and the difficulties that we have in interpreting transcripts as they come in, and also the sending and receiving transcripts for reverse transfer back to the colleges. So again, thank you for that. You talked about the sending the spreadsheet back to the colleges, and we know the way that the state metrics are set now. There's a true advantage, if you will, at the college level, community college level, to engage in active reverse transfer. Those metrics now typically don't assist the universities. So I'm just curious as to the commitment that Sam Houston has put into this process, because it sounds like you've committed both time and resources to it.
We have put a fair amount into it, but you'd be surprised how little, and I really almost hate to say how little. I get quarter-time release spring and fall, full-time release in the summer. I have had for at least the last 6 years. Other than that, there is no resources physically committed on campus. I teach computer science. It turns out that most of our programmers were my former students, including the associate vice president and stuff like that. And they have developed all of this program and the others that are listed in this thing at nothing, no money has ever been budgeted. Now, saying that, this is a significant expense if you want to do it through one of the vendors. I will give you one example. University of Houston, this was about 3 years ago, was wanting to duplicate our online articulation program. We have over 50 degrees where a student can click on it, it drops down, shows them all the courses at SAM, the corresponding courses on the TCCN number. No budgeted money. PeopleSoft wanted them for the first college to come up with $70,000 for the first college, $50,000 per college after that, and then they wanted $50,000 per college maintenance into the future. Obviously, they didn't go through with that program. And so a lot of the stuff right now, if you want it, you've got to develop it locally as opposed to through your vendor, or you're just not going to make it.
I just want to congratulate you on your effort.
Are there other questions for Dr. Burris?
Thank you.
Thank you. Please join me.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we have some time before we are due to have lunch, and so I thought that it might be worthwhile to have a discussion as a group to some of the things that we see as issues that are perhaps limiting the implementation of reverse transfer. Things that I have heard and that I will put out on the table is that there seems to be a need for some way to associate transcripts from different universities for a single student, and so some sort of common ID or other strategy that would facilitate transcript matching. Something that would facilitate the electronic import of transcript information across various types of student information platforms. And then some common interpretation of legitimate educational interest for FERPA. What are other thoughts from the group? Dan?
Some attempt to move towards a common numbering system across all institutions. That's something we heard this last week at a Pathways seminar, that one of the big stumbling blocks that we're all facing is that there's a disconnect between the community college common numbering system and what the 4 years are using. And that would certainly help reverse articulation.
Another important point I think he brought up is the opt-in, opt-out, and the misunderstanding what that means. I would think that for the benefit of students, we'd have it as a default opt-in with them having to choose opt-out, but a better explanation what that means is not a, and I understand, you get one of those check marks, you always take it off because you don't want a bunch of junk mail, but I don't think a better education what that is, maybe a better location where that is in a default setting. So. Okay.
As an observer here, more than a participant in this particular process, what I'm hearing in all of these comments is an uneven sense of priority around this. In other words, the commitment not being the same equally across the board, and certainly in terms of commitment of resources, there seems to be some question about prioritization, and particularly there's a little irony in the notion, I understand it fully, that the electronic process is prohibitive in terms of cost, but when you think of the cost that's already going into this in terms of the manual labor of doing a lot of this, clearly there is a lot of commitment there, but it seems to be not linked up across the board.
One other might be data collection. As was indicated, it's difficult to get the information back from the colleges about how successful the program has been. Mm-hmm. And if there is some way that the coordinating board can assist us or assist all of us in getting that data to begin to see the magnitude of the success of reverse transfer.
The point I wanted to make was, I think it's still, even if it's made to be centralized and then perfunctory, there's still someone has to input the information. And if it's made electronic, it can be compromised. And therefore, if it can be compromised, once again, my question is, how do the registrars feel about that? Are there enough layers of security protections in any accessible database that would make registrars comfortable? And furthermore, if it's centralized and if the state requires that we have to go through an open bid with several vendors, is it cost prohibitive even at a centralized level? If made perfunctory and centralized, will it be cost prohibitive rather than having the cost at the local university level? If it's centralized, then it becomes one location, but still costly and prohibitive. That's a concern I think needs to be addressed with some kind of cost benefit.
Yeah, I've been interpreting the comments about centralization as more a common set of policies or rules or standards rather than a central location of all of the data. I don't know whether I've misunderstood, but I think this like let's have a statewide policy for how students are numbered so that they can be identified at every institution. Or let's have a statewide policy for how transcripts are marked so that they can be read, but that the transcripts live at the separate institutions.
But that's what I mean by centralized decision making. I mean, if the authority is centralized, then it says, okay, here are the rules that govern this type of behavior. If it's decentralized, then the unit manager can then say, okay, I'm going to make this decision independent of what the coordinating board says. That's what I mean by centralized and decentralized decision making. Is there a way that the coordinating board can say, okay, you will do this, and then is there any assurances that at the localized level it's going to happen every time data is entered into the registrar on behalf of a student's transcript from however many universities or community colleges a student has transferred to and from?
I think part of the confusion may stem from the distinction between the data, the information that is going back and forth between college and university. That's one part of the issue. But essentially, when that information goes back to the college, it becomes an issue of applicability. So there is still a process by which the receiving institution has to determine that the courses that the student took subsequent to leaving that institution now is applicable to a particular degree, a certificate, or multiple degrees at that institution. So that right now is part of the time-intensive process as it comes back. In our experience, we are very successful at sending those transcripts back to the institutions, but have experienced, similar to what Sam Houston reported, that some institutions are actually using that information and taking the time to apply it perhaps to degrees, while with others it just sits in their system and is not applied, either because it can't be identified or because they don't have the staff or resources to determine applicability. So I think there are multiple issues there.
But that's akin to what I'm saying, that will the programmers write a script to detect, for example, one of the main courses I teach on my campus is a junior level course, and it's called Business Communication at the undergraduate level. But most universities, the students are taking it at the sophomore level. Our business school is AACSB accredited, the Association for the Advancement of Collegiate Schools of Business, which means that we could put our accreditation in jeopardy if we accept a sophomore level business communication course, since my course is a core course. So how complex would that algorithm or that script be for a programmer to write to determine on behalf of a student whether or not a core course in one university is acceptable or not acceptable when the course was taken at another university, which is also AACSB, but the course in that particular university is offered at a different level?
I guess it's my understanding, and perhaps please speak up if you disagree with me, that the actual auditing of whether or not a student has met degree requirements, and that would be whether it is a four-year degree that is receiving transfer credit from another institution or a two-year program that is receiving reverse transfer of coursework from a four-year institution. But the actual degree audit and the use of transfer credits towards completion of degree requirements is at the discretion of the receiving institution. And so, for example, Prairie View would retain its authority of use or non-use of transfer credits for a business degree. Are we in agreement that that authority needs to remain with the institution that is granting the degree program and should not be centralized?
With the caveat that there is this understanding or rule that core curriculum is automatically transferred.
But again, I think we get into that issue, particularly at the four-year universities, that what constitutes core complete may not necessarily meet expectations within a particular degree program. And certainly we've had a good bit of discussion of that over the past couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's akin to it would help develop MOUs, 2+2s, if there's a way for the technology to help us and at least put the things in the right slots and so they don't get lost. And then our folks at our individual campuses can talk about, okay, how do these things match up? That would be the responsibility and the purview of the institutions in the conversation. But I think that right now what we've looked at is there's the plethora of software options, the fact that all slots are not the same, all spreadsheets don't have the same categories, and the Common Course numbering system is at least, and we heard the university perspective is that there's a history to some of these courses. Some of the numbers that we're using in the Common Course numbering system are you're using for another slot of a type of course, and that can be a 2 or 3 or even 5-year process to clear that slot, that number out and back and forth. So it's going to be certainly complex issue, but I think if we can just identify what fields need to be filled in and how do those individual software packages fill in those fields, that we can all agree upon, okay, we're looking at the right things at the right time to make our MOUs work.
One thing that I would add too, and I have absolutely no solution for this whatsoever, but we need to keep in mind that this information somehow needs to filter down to the students through the advisors. We'd had a discussion about that, sort of a sideline earlier, but if the students at the community college, high school level, whatever, are getting these courses and they know that their ultimate goal is getting a degree that will be pre-med or getting an engineering degree, stuff like that, that the reverse articulation is something that they can use as a tool to be sure that they stay on time so that they don't get kind of sidetracked on a couple of courses that the college might like or the dual enrollment might like for them to take, but that they can actually take that course their junior year or their senior year at a 4-year institution, transfer that back and get the associates. And so how we tackle that advising issue, some of these things like common numbering and things like that I think are important, but actually getting this information to the students ultimately is it's probably the biggest challenge, but it's probably the most important result as well, I would think.
Will all of this information, if it's done as the proposal requested, would this be a centralized database where all this information is stored, or how would it work? I mean, how would, say, Sam Houston go into Prairie View system? How would Prairie View go into Texas Tech? Am I not understanding this correctly?
I think it's more of a push. And so when the four-year schools identify students that might be good candidates for reverse transfer degree completion at two-year institutions, then there's an opt-in and opt-out or some type of system to typically notify the student that they are eligible for this, and then the data gets sent. And I think the question we're trying to deal with here is how do we facilitate this data send in a way that it comes to the receiving institution in a usable and not particularly onerous format so that it can be implemented well, that the receiving schools are easily able to identify transferable coursework, things that might fit into their degree program so that they can get credit for degree completion for students that may have transferred out of that institution before they were complete with an associate's level degree.
And the only thing I would add to that, Ann, is that we maximize the automation.
Yeah. It needs to be something that is as low man-hour, person hour as we can. Yeah.
Something that Barbara alluded to earlier dealt with the whole idea of how is it that we can get our home colleges, home universities to really participate. And one of the things I wrote down after she talked was, are we sending Texas Woman's University the information on because yes, they do send us their transcripts, and I don't know if we are or not. So I'm glad you brought that up. That is something that absolutely I can go back and check on. And kind of understanding, I think, the benefit to the students. And that's what it's all about, is the benefit to the students. And I've had students before who might not have completely finished a degree when they left our college and then got the reverse transfer. And because they were working somewhere, they were able to go in and say, look, I have this associate's degree, and they're still working towards their bachelor's, but they got a raise because they had that degree and that credential, and that was helping them go to school. So I think there are lots of ways that it can benefit students, and we don't even know all of the different ways. But I do think it's important that we communicate both ways, and I'm going to check on that.
And I think one more point is, at least in our experience, it's rare to have a student that moves with a definite point in time from college to university. Much more common is the fact that they're enrolled in both, or they're taking some courses at the college and others at the university. In those situations, it becomes a little bit easier because then both degree audit systems are open at the same time. So if that information is going back to Colin, theoretically, that student is still an active student and can be put back into the degree audit system and sort of facilitate that process. But still, you need to be able to identify the student with a common number, and I think that's a good key of information that is an obstacle here.
Other issues, barriers, opportunities, perhaps is a more positive word, that we would like to bring to the table for consideration?
I think one of the things we have to remember is that most four-year institutions have one or two feeder schools, the main feeder schools, like UT Pan American, STC. Our students, we're probably the largest feeder school for Pan American. So we don't have to really be looking at this as how are we going to deal with 100 institutions in Texas. We can focus on how are we going to deal with these 2 or 3 institutions first to get everything aligned, and then once it works well with it, that'll already make an impact both on the student graduation rates and everything else, and help the students. And then we can use those to move forward with those other institutions that we may only have 2 or 3% of our students going to, and that way we're not tackling the huge giant. We're tackling one point at a time and still making an impact.
Any other thoughts? Yes.
A couple of years ago, when we were doing our CB 116s to turn in our graduates for our child development program, we noticed that we had a low number, but we had a lot of students in the program. So the last couple of years, what I've challenged my faculty to do with the help of an advisor is they sit down and they pull all the students that have been in the college, that have taken courses but have never completed, and then they look to see how many more, or they didn't file for graduation because that'll opt in, opt out. A lot of them had enough hours to graduate. And so we've been graduating them and sending them, like you said, emails. And yes, they do love to get their associate's degree. They come down, they pick it up from our office. But it is very labor intensive. And my area in particular, there were so many challenges, the college level, with the graduation and the trying to get all those little things in a row to get them to the licensing agencies, because I also have nursing and all that. So we have our own little operation where we do, my staff has been trained by the transcript auditors and the transcript evaluation office and how to do course substitutions, and so they come in there and we sort of do a little one-stop shop if you're in our EMS program, our paramedic program, our nursing program, and our child development program. But it is extremely labor intensive, and if we had this ability to have the transcripts, dropped in and have some sort of system where they could be evaluated so we could graduate, I mean, it would just make a huge, huge difference, because so many of ours do go on and we have to call, and we find that out. We call them up and we talk to them and they tell us they're in the university, and we get them to mail us their transcripts, and then we go from there. But it's very labor intensive.
So if there are not other thoughts or ideas that we'd like to add to the issue list, my next question for you is, what do we do now that we have this nice list of issues? Thoughts about how we move forward with this and how we take action for perhaps recommendations to the board for consideration.
I have a question again. Has there been a pilot test? I just received this, so I haven't read it thoroughly, but has there been some pilot test as suggested that been done? Do we know the efficacy of intricacies of whether or not something like this will work?
I think that there probably are some examples of university pairings that have been very fruitful. It certainly sounds like Sam Houston State has been very successful in some of their interactions. Texas A&M has worked very closely with Blinn College because there is a very strong feeder pattern from Blinn into Texas A&M, and so we've been working very diligently to try to facilitate reverse transfer. And so I think that there are examples of really good practice across the state, but they look different. And, one of the things that I've got on our list of issues is perhaps some sort of data tracking to try to identify where this is working well, because if we can get a good feel of where it's working well, that could be that there are models or other types of practices that could be implemented at other, 2-year, 4-year pairs or groups of schools. And so I think it may just be a point for Ueac to start identifying, how do we go about trying to identify these areas where things are working really well? Are there, would it be helpful to us as a group to ask the coordinating board to facilitate some data collection so that we can get a better handle of where things are going?
Well, that's the point that I was trying to allude to, is benchmarking, and then perhaps some best practices could be established after benchmarking a couple of pairings, because you all know that the budgets for some institutions is not the same as other institutions. So the affordability of such programs, even if it's benchmarked at, say, a College Station that has pretty good endowment and a pretty big budget, compared to some of the smaller
Understood.
institutions, they may not be able to apply even a program that's benchmarked for best practices with a school that has 4 or 5 times budgetary advantage. So it has to be something common and uniform that is applicable across the various institutions if we make recommendations.
I guess I would suggest alternately there may be different models, and this may be a situation where there's not a one-size-fits-all solution, that something that might work for a very large institution may not be the right strategy for an institution of a different size. But again, we don't really know exactly what models are out there, and so I think that some sort of systemized data collection may help us to try to identify those.
But that's akin to my point, that if it's not a one-size-fits-all, then that could be problematic. For example, if you go to shop at Kroger's and you have a Kroger card, then they know what you're buying, and they'll print out a custom-tailored coupon specifically for you based on your pattern of purchases and your purchase habits. For institutions, though, if it's something that's not uniform, and if it has to be a different approach for different folks, then are you going to create a similar problem in the long run that is a solution to the problem that you're trying to address?
Interesting point.
I think this is where we're looking at and discussing the standardization of the identification of the students and standardization of basically the electronic communication between institutions, regardless of whether it's pairing institutions or one institution to many. Because then once that's done, the software companies themselves, if the standards are set by, let's say, the coordinating board, the state of Texas, saying this is what we expect all the fields to be, the software companies themselves are going to try and comply so that they can place themselves into the market to be able to get Collins business, Prairie View's business, because they'll say we're already ready for this program that the coordinating board is supporting, and it would bring that cost down.
Okay, but that's the point that I was alluding to earlier, is that without a centralized database that's accessible to any Texas university, how can you say that without testing and modeling this particular software would be a correct thing to do? You can't really put the cart before the horse. I think you have to have some knowledge as to whether or not a centralized database would be the best solution, as opposed to having all of these various registrars at different universities inputting something which is a policy requirement from the coordinating board. I don't know if we have enough knowledge to make a decision about that.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do we have a counterpart in the registrar community? Because I think that's a voice that needs to be at the table in this discussion. I mean, we're talking from one perspective, and I've been visiting with my registrar online, and he said, yeah, we've got these issues, but they're the ones that would know probably the better option. So I'm not sure how we interact with our counterparts on that side.
And I'd like to suggest that we come up with some set of recommendations that include piloting, because I think that's a great idea. But I don't think we're headed toward a centralized database. I think there's no interest in that anywhere. And you've raised, I think, Reginald, a good suggestion that sets up the possibility of fraud or difficulties. But this is an interesting issue because it's really of primary importance institutionally to the two-year schools, that they have a chance to show completion for students that start with them. But it has an impact on the four-year schools because they're the ones that are going to have to give the information to the two-year schools in a way that's usable so they can get the job done. So there should be some piloting. It shouldn't start with a statewide blanket change. But I think that we need a small group with registrars and representatives from both two-year and four-year schools to come up with specific recommendations about how that pilot should be structured, what the problems are to be addressed, and the approaches that would be appropriate.
And so am I understanding you correctly, Larry, that you think maybe some sort of separate focused meeting with representatives from the 2- and 4-year schools, including particularly those individuals on those campuses who handle this type of issue from the registrar's office, perhaps address some of these issues, talk about what types of strategies might serve as good pilots, and talk about what data collection might be helpful in identifying success?
That sounds right. And I'd just also add that it would be nice perhaps to have representation both from 2-year and 4-year students.
Oh, that's interesting. Other thoughts about that or other ideas?
Recommend that we might consider TACRO, since that is the agency of registrars, be the organization we work with or recommend to.
And it's my understanding that this has been a topic of conversation and consternation at TACRO for some time. and I would just echo what Larry was saying. I don't think there's any call here for a centralized database. I think the information systems at every institution are unmanageable enough as it is without trying to have us all switch to one. But rather what we're talking about, I think, is a way to better have either these systems talk to one another or some common metric or determining factor that would allow us to communicate one system to another, particularly how to identify a particular student. I think, to me, that's primary.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't see this as really different from gathering, a bunch of biology professors in a room and talking about the student learning outcomes of an anatomy and physiology. This is like getting the registrars together and say, okay, to make reverse articulation and make all this work, what would be some guiding principles and some learning outcomes, as it were, for reverse transfer?
So I'm just going to chime in that TACRO does meet annually, and their meeting is coming up. It's October 27th through 30th, and I know Dr. Cornelius is on their agenda this year as well to talk about some core curriculum issues, I believe, and it would be a perfect opportunity to sort of get this message in front of them, get their input, and see if we can move forward either with a meeting in the future collectively with this group or a subcommittee or whatever you all decide you wish to pursue.
So is that an agreeable strategy across the board? Reinhold, you will visit with folks at TACRO when they convene in October. If their response to convening a more focused joint meeting in the future is warmly received, can you help facilitate that meeting?
Yes, we can certainly do that.
Need a motion or something to give you some power on that, or is that just enough for us to tell you?
I don't think that needs a motion. I mean.
Okay. Well, very good. I might suggest it's about 1:15 Why don't we take a break, give us a chance to run across the hall if we need and to check email and things like that. We'll reconvene at noon. Hopefully at that point in time, it looks like lunch is starting to set up. And as you might recall, we have delayed discussion of item 3, which is just kind of some updates on other issues that have been worked on by the coordinating board. Reinhold's going to provide us with that information while we eat. And so we'll see you back at noon. As we get started, I had feedback from our morning session that some of our colleagues who have joined by web streaming have had difficulty hearing some of the conversation. And so I'd ask, particularly for those of you who are sharing a microphone, if you would pull the microphone a little bit closer to you when you speak, that will help those who are listening at a distance keep up with our conversation. I guess just as a general guideline, you should be able to hear your voice in the PA system, and that's a good gauge as to whether or not it's being picked up. So I appreciate your help with that. And I think with that, Reinhold, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Anne. So agenda item 3 is meant to give you an update about several things we talked before in this committee. The first, if you go to your materials, there are several items listed, A, B, C, and so on. The first is the election of committee chair, and I just wanted to let you know that this committee elects their own chair, as it did last year. And we would like to go to a rotating election of chairs so that they have a time of 2 years serving. And then if things work normally, that we alternate the election of chairs between years so you get a continuity into the system. And so that's the reason why we did not want to put the election of a chair on this meeting's agenda, and would start next spring at your next spring meeting with an election. The second item is an update about low-producing programs. That is the review of the Corning Board staff of number of graduates from degree programs. And there's a classification of low-producing, and that is over a time span of 5 years, the number of graduates less than 25 for an undergraduate program, less than 15 for a master's program, and less than 10 for a doctoral program. And with the last legislative session, the statute for this review changed, as you may recall, and with that our rules changed as well. And so now going forward with already the last academic year, 2014, the staff does the review of those programs and produces a list of those programs, and then we inform the governing boards of the institutions if a certain program is low producing, falling under these numbers for 3 consecutive years in a row. And if that happens in time for a legislative appropriation request, then the system of the institution, or the institution, if it's not an assistant, would put those programs on their appropriation request if they decide to keep them as low producing. So this would be going forward for the legislative appropriation request in 2016, because for next legislative session, those are all in, the requests. So we've finished the review, and the report of the low-producing programs will go to the October board. And once that happens, our website, which is just our normal website, and then /LPP, will have a table with the programs which are low producing that year, with a special marking for those which are low producing 3 years in a row. All those numbers will show up. And just to talk in numbers, we are not talking about a great number of programs. The report will show that 70 programs for the entire state were low producing last year, but of those, only 12 programs were low producing 3 years in a row. And that may have different reasons, because programs are exempt for review for the first 5 years, and other exemptions which were granted previously. So in coming years, that list may change. But that is the status of that. And so if you're interested in that, coming with the board meeting, that information will be there. And of course, as the procedure now is, we are preparing letters to the governing boards of the institutions where there are, of the 12 programs which are low producing 3 years in a row. Do you? I may also add that we, at the same time, offered the governing boards to look at previous years' low-producing programs, and all those programs are still in phase-out. And if the governing board decided to keep them and put them out of phase-out into regular activity, they were offered to do that, and few programs were chosen to be kept like that, 17 for the entire state. So again, it's not a big number overall, but that was also part of the process of switching from the old system to the new system. if you don't have any questions in regards to low-producing programs, then I go to item C, which is the core web center and the website, including with the FAQ. So the status for that is now we have a new website for core curriculum, and it's listed there. It's again after the main web URL for our agency /TX core curriculum leads you to the website for that. And on there you find the links to the listing of the current core curriculum, which is now housed at the agency. And you also find the link to the old, quote-unquote, old core, which is still on the web page. We also kept some information people need for assessment for the old core on that web page. If you have any other information in regards to the old core, which you might find is not, or which you may find, may be looking for, please get in touch with me, and we'll put that up there as well. I haven't had any other inquiries like that so far. We worked on a frequently asked question page, and we have finished that. It's not posted. It should be posted sometime next week. So that is important for the new opening of the core portal to enter core courses for the next year. As you know, each institution may submit courses or changes to courses in the core curriculum once a year. And so we are working on having that system open in mid-October. One of the agenda items from last time was that you asked us to work out a timeline and the mechanics, how that submission of the next academic year's core curriculum will work. And the new web page for that you find as a printout in the materials. And important to that is that in our Corning Board rules for the core curriculum, there was a deadline for submitting the core curriculum, and you recommended to us to take that deadline out, and that rule change went before our board's committee meeting, was favorably voted on, and should go to the October board meeting. So we expect that the deadline will be struck, and so that means that each institution can decide on its own when is the best date to submit the new courses for the core. Doing that, the institution should consider that we think it will take up to 75 days for review and approval of those courses, for review, approval, or denial. And on that page, you see 4 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4 marked. And so, because we plan to build in a 1-month review period and then a 1-month discussion, or we don't really have a term for it, appeal, rebuttal period, where the institutions can come to us and improve on their courses. And we will work with you and hopefully come to a satisfactory outcome. But because of that, the review process is up to 75 days. And the other thing is what we're working on in-house, and that is for the universities, that the course inventory for the universities is rolled over to the new year, to the new academic year earlier than before. It used to be at the beginning of March, and that turns out to be fairly late if institutions want to make changes to their course numbers and course names and get the core courses then approved for the catalog, which has to be printed also in the spring. So that is a change where we will try to open the course inventory a month earlier. This, of course, is only for, it's not for community colleges because they go by the courses in the ACGM.
I have a question about the approval process. And when I go, it's kind of a nuts and bolts question. When I go online in October to update our core curriculum for the next year, I'm just wondering, what exactly am I going to see? I'm going to have a few courses to add. I'm going to have a few courses to delete. All of those courses that we entered for 14-15, do I have to re-enter those? Are they already there? And do I have that list, the existing list, to work with?
You have that to work with.
Okay.
Are there any other questions to the submission or the timeline? Then we go to the next item, which was the rule changes, and one rule change we discussed. So you see actually in the handouts a printout of the board materials for the rule changes. So the rules are printed there with changes highlighted. And another rule change you recommended to us at the last meeting is to add additional transcript codes for the component area option courses. We thought that this was a good idea for making transparent what kind of courses these are. We were supposed to talk to TACRO beforehand, and over the summer, when this was worked out, I missed my opportunity to do that. And therefore, we got input from TACRO and some other people which were very concerned that this would actually lead to confusion, these extra numbers. And so our assistant commissioner, Dr. X. Peebles, decided to recommend to withdraw these changes. And especially that there is no haste required for this. So we really should work it out with TACRO and get all the implications set straight, and for the interest of all the stakeholders.
Reinald, will you be taking this to TACRO when you visit with them in October?
Yes, that's one of the points I will tell them. I talked to the president of TACRO and informed her about this pulling of the withdrawal of the proposed change, and I told her that I would like to present about the core and this. And that would be the first step to clear it up. Then, depending on the feedback I get, I will get with you and through the chairs of the Ueac, and if it is still a desired item next year, then we can put it back on the agenda for spring. and discuss it again. But we go first through a discussion period now if people really think, if the stakeholders really think that this is something we should do.
Reinhold, it appears on the change that the 90 itself is stricken. Is that the case?
It is stricken because in the proposed change it turns up under I. You see, the 090 was then used for the option B of the component area option. But since the entire change for this section was withdrawn, it will just be the 090 for the component area option. I didn't mark that separately. I just wanted this page marked with a cross line and withdrawn, that people don't get confused that this is still floating around.
So it remains a block 90, just not a differentiated block 90.
That's correct. The component area option stays as it's undifferentiated. And if you have any thoughts about the issue, please be free to email me about it. Then I can use that information in all the discussions. And going forward, what we put on the agenda for the next meeting, if we put something on it.
Excuse me, Ronald, I think it would be very helpful if you could share with us, perhaps by email, the concerns that TACRO expresses so that we could be thinking about exactly what their issues are. I felt like this was a good proposal and it solved problems for us, and so it'd be nice to know what their problems that they think it creates would be.
Yes, I can certainly do that.
Thanks.
The next item, E, is the 60 semester credit hour change in associate's degree programs. And as a resource, I printed again, I printed the memorandum which was sent out in this regard. And the deadline for, so the memorandum, to recapitulate, says that institutions have to respond with a list of programs to the coordinating board, and the memorandum included spreadsheets for each institution with a list of programs. They changed to 60 semester credit hours if they were higher than that, or let it stand at 60 semester credit hours if they were already at that level, or if they felt like they had a compelling academic reason to have a higher number of semester credit hours for that program. And we have so far, the deadline for this is October 31st. And we have received so far very few of the replies, and we have been working on a case-by-case on these issues. And we will keep doing that. It is really a course-by-course review. However, staff will also look at the review with programs in aggregate. And so that's why it is important that we have a deadline where we can have all the programs together so we can see the issues and argumentations in aggregate and can consider that.
I have a question, just to follow up, because we worked on recommendations on not meeting the 60 hours, some of the options. Where is that at?
That recommendation was presented by your chair to the cause meeting, and they voted favorably on it. I'm sorry, I should have said that. The next item on here is field of study and program of study, and our assistant commissioner told me that he would like to talk to you about this, but he was at a different meeting during the morning, and so he did not know quite exactly when he is back. We'll wait with this item till he comes, so he can update you on that. Printed out here are just two resources for our webpage, where you find our field of study programs. That's under transfer policies. And for programs and studies, there is we don't have a web page, but Chief Texas has a web page with programs of studies listed on there. The next item is the Ueac and LTAC summit meeting. That was the meeting my colleague Alan Mitchie talked to you about last time. And the way it is developed is that the Graduate Education Advisory Committee and the LTAC wanted to meet together first. And that will happen October 13. The agenda for this has not been finalized completely, so I can't give it to you. The way it will work out is that in the morning, LTAC will meet and do their routine business about distance education programs, and then towards the midday, they will join together with people from the Graduate Education Advisory to discuss their agenda items. If you're interested in this, and it seemed like some of you were, this will be broadcast like this meeting is, and you can just go to the main page of the Corning Board, and at the day there will be the link at the top, and you can listen to that. And I can also email you the agenda once I have it in the next coming days. And the last item I have here is the Community, State, and Technical Colleges Liaison Meeting. This is a meeting from our agency for the Community and State Technical Colleges Liaisons. It happens once a year, and it's a whole day affair where the liaisons get updated about the the important new things. And that agenda also hadn't been finalized, but I listed some of the items which will be touched on. So that is the update I have for the Corning Board. And we have, so if you don't have another question, we can move to the next agenda item, which is a presentation by Corning Board staff members. That's agenda item 5. And We have Dr. Suzanne Morale-Vale from the Division of P16 Initiatives and College Readiness. And we have Claudette Jenks with us.
I'm waiting for the screen. There we go, to pop up. Hello. Again, my name is Claudette Jenks. I'm with the Division of P16 Initiatives, and I'm co-presenting here with Dr. Susan Morales-Vale. We've been asked to give you all an overview of HB5 and discuss some of the considerations. For some of you, this is probably not new information. You probably are really entrenched in this already. So we apologize for and keep bombarding you with this information. But again, we just wanted to start with that foundation of providing an overview for you. A lot of you are probably familiar with the basic blueprint of the new current curriculum requirements that have been developed through HB5. You have the Foundation High School program that is at a minimum of 22 credits required to graduate. You have 4 credits in English Language Arts, and here you have the prescribed English 1, 2, and 3. However, with this new program, English 4 is no longer required. Students are able to take one advanced course, and they can choose from a variety of different course options. And I'll show you those course options here shortly in the next couple of slides. You have 3 credits in mathematics, which would include Algebra 1 and Geometry. However, students are no longer required to take Algebra 2. They can choose Algebra 2, however, they can also choose from a variety of different course offerings, including advanced courses in this area. You have 3 credits of science, and if you remember with the prior graduation plans under the recommended plan, it was biology, chemistry, and physics that were underneath that plan. However, this one just requires biology 1, and students can choose from 1 to 2 advanced courses, and that's IPC or an advanced course, and then another advanced course to satisfy these science requirements. And again, in the next couple of slides, I will show you what those wide variety of offerings are. You have 3 credits in social studies. This would include world geography or world history, or a combination of both for 1 requirement. And then you have U.S. history, and then half credits in both government and economics. Students under this program also take 5 credits in elective courses and 2 credits in languages other than English. The important thing to consider for this one is that typically students would take 2 foreign languages in the same language. However, now they are able to take computer programming languages to satisfy this course requirement. Students are also taking 1 credit in PE and 1 credit in fine arts, and then the speech requirement is almost integrated in some of these core content areas. This in itself allows eligibility for general admissions to a Texas public 4-year institution. So again, it's just eligibility for that. There are, of course, other things to consider. As I mentioned just a while ago, there are several course offerings for students if they choose not to take English 4. You have a variety of options listed here. I won't go through all of them, but we just wanted to show you a wide array of course offerings that a student can take to satisfy that advanced credit. That includes humanities, public speaking 3, debate 3, and more importantly, if you see at the bottom of the right-hand corner, there's a college prep English language arts course, and that's pursuant to Texas Education Code 28.014, and I'll go over that college prep, what that college prep course looks like shortly in the next couple of slides. These are all the wide varieties of different offerings that students can take to satisfy that 3rd math credit. Algebra 2 is listed here. However, students can take several different course offerings, including mathematical models with applications, a series of advanced placement courses or IB courses, and here you have some locally developed courses as well in math. So that could satisfy their third credit. Here's the short list of advanced courses that could satisfy that second science credit that I mentioned, because remember they have the option of IPC or an advanced credit, so this is the limited list that they can take to satisfy that option. And there is more of an exhaustive list of credit offerings here to satisfy the credits for the science, that third science credit. Keep in mind that even though there are all these different options, we know that rural areas and some other school districts don't have the options, all these exhaustive options available to students. So it could be more limiting, or it could be in some of the more urban areas, more offerings are available. So that's, again, the wide variety of different course offerings dependent upon region and so on. So now we have the Foundation High School program plus the endorsement areas. Many of you are probably familiar that there are 5 endorsement areas that school districts can offer. If they only offer one, it must be the multidisciplinary studies endorsement. And I'll go through some of these endorsement areas, but the 5 here that are listed are the ones that a school district can offer, including the STEM endorsement, business and industry, public service, arts and humanities, and again the multidisciplinary studies. All of these would require students to take 4 credits in science and 4 credits in math to bring that foundation plus endorsement to 26 credits total. Again, there's no real prescription, just depending upon what endorsement a student chooses. So it really is dependent on the pathway, the educational pathway the student will take. This is going to be the foundation plus endorsement is the default for incoming high school freshmen, and this started with the incoming 9th graders this past fall, as many of you know.
I'm sure you're also all aware that starting in the sophomore year, a student with written permission from his or her parents can opt out of the endorsement that they had chosen as 9th graders. So they can't opt out of that until the 10th grade.
This is another list that just shows you the math credits under the endorsement. This is slightly different than the previous list that I showed you because there's additional options available, including that college preparatory math course under the pursuant to Texas Education Code 28.014. And I'll talk to you in a little bit more about that. And several of you are probably very knowledgeable about it already. But these are the offerings for the student to satisfy that 4th math credit under an endorsement area. And you see listed here, Algebra 2 is one of those options. And here's the list for the 4th science credit. This is a similar list to what satisfied the 3rd credit science credit options as well, but you can see that it satisfies both the options that are available for both the 3rd and 4th year credits. We just wanted you to see the list again, I guess. Here is the endorsement, just a sample of the endorsement. We're not going to go through each one. They're very similar. The key here is to realize that not only is there an endorsement area, but there are options even within an endorsement area. There's option A that students can choose, which is a coherent sequence of 4 or more credits in CTE that consist of 2 of the same career. 2 of the credits are courses in the same career cluster, and including 1 advanced course in that career cluster. They can choose from all CTE career clusters. So those are the 3 credits. The final course has to come, and the sequence has to come from the limited list that I have there. That's agriculture, food, and natural resources, marketing, hospitality, and tourism. So students would have to select their final course from those options. You also have option B, which is 4 elective credits by selecting 3 levels in the following areas, which would include debate, public speaking, journalism, advanced broadcast, those types of things. So I know when I was in school, a lot of these weren't even offered in my school, so I'm not sure how many are really offered for these, but just keep in mind that you can have some great variability here depending on what region you're coming from, or even school district or area you're coming from. We also wanted to show you the STEM endorsement, mainly because this would require students to take Algebra 2, chemistry, and physics. Again, there are 2 options available within this endorsement itself, similar to several of the other endorsements. But option A, again, is that coherent sequence of 4 more credits in a CTE course that consists of at least 2 credits in the same career cluster, and then one advanced CTE course that includes a higher level course in the sequence, and then that final course sequence must be selected from a STEM career cluster. There were several different career clusters listed, so I didn't put them in the slide, but you can see the variability there. Option B is, again, a coherent sequence of 4 credits in computer science, selected from several of these options here, including computer science 1, 2, and 3, AP computer science, gaming and programming, so on and so forth. But there are several different options that students can choose from to take the STEM endorsement. The final endorsement we just wanted to touch on is the one that every school district will need to at least provide for students. It's required to at least provide the multidisciplinary studies endorsement if they're going to provide any endorsement areas. So this is this would require 4 advanced courses that prepare students to go successfully into the workforce or to go into college, post-secondary education without remediation. They can choose from within one endorsement area or among multiple endorsements, so there's no coherent sequence with this endorsement. Students also are required to take 4 credits, again, in the 4 foundation subject areas, including English 4 and chemistry and/or physics. They will also take 4 credits. They could also take 4 credits in advanced placement or dual credit selected from English, math, science, social studies, etc. So that is the many options available within the multidisciplinary endorsement area. Aside from the Foundation Plus endorsements, there is also the Distinguished Level of Achievement, which is also 26 credits. The real difference between all of these is that this Distinguished Level of Achievement would require Algebra 2. So you have the same curriculum requirements of the foundation program plus at least 1 endorsement area, and the math would have to include Algebra 2 and then 4 science credits similar to your other endorsement areas, and then 2 elective credits to complete this distinguished level of achievement. This is required for eligibility for automatic admission in top 10% for the graduating class. So this is the one most students would probably want to be under, because it just requires the additional Algebra 2, basically. House Bill 5 also provides some what they call performance acknowledgments, and this is recognizing students for outstanding performance in achieving dual credit coursework or bilingualism or biliteracy, outstanding performance on AP exams or IB exams, and then any achievement in getting high performance on ACT or SAT and other assessments. There also would be a performance acknowledgement that a student can earn by earning a business or industry certification or industry license. And those performance acknowledgements would be placed on students' transcripts. We don't know how just yet, but they would be on the student transcript. I mentioned in the previous slide about the college preparatory course. I'm sure many of you have actually been involved in the development of this or have heard have some knowledge of it. The college preparatory course is in both English, language, arts, and math. School districts were to partner with at least one higher ed institution to develop and provide this college prep course in both English and math. It is recommended for students that are in grade 12 that have not yet met college readiness standards. The key here, though, is upon successful completion of the course, the student would be exempt from the TSI requirements in the content area of that course. So they could be exempt from the requirements in math or English language arts. And they're only exempt from the partnering institution. Now, there's lots of complications. I'd say complications, but a lot of different things happening there. One, you have to think about the development of the course. It's locally developed with school districts and in participating institutions of higher education. They work together collaboratively to determine what successful completion means. And so it could look very different from one place to another. So if students take this course, you really wouldn't know what the success of the course meant. And because a successful completion means that the students are exempt from TSI, that can cause some challenges. That's some of the considerations that you have to think about later on down the road. What's interesting here, too, is that our commissioner had the authority to determine the duration of the exemption and the applicability to non-partnering institutions. So if a school district were to partner with one institution of higher education but didn't have a partnership with another institution, we have a new rule in place, and I'll just show you the rule here shortly, but the commissioner did have the authority, and those decisions were made through a negotiated rulemaking committee, I think in July or May. So here's the new rule that was adopted. It is in section 4.54 under exemptions. It's number 10, the very last bullet under the exemptions. And I'll read this to you, but it's a student who successfully completes a college preparatory course under this section, the 28.014, is exempt for a period of 12 months from the date of high school graduation with respect, again, to that content area. So if they took the English language arts college preparatory course or the math, that's where they will have the exemption. The exemption applies only at the institution of higher education that partners with the school district in which the student is enrolled and provided the course. So again, there's that limitation. However, we did add, the negotiating room committee did add that an institution of higher education may enter an agreement with another partnering institution to accept that exemption for the college prep course. So you have the school district and the IHE partnering. However, there is an opportunity for the institutions to partner with one another if they take a look at what their successful completion looks like and agree, okay, that's what we want for our students as well, and then they can enter into agreement. It is really early on to know that there's any work being done. I've heard some rumblings in, I think, the South Texas area that has begun working on this, but because a lot of students, it's too early to see that a lot of students are actually taking this college preparatory course. I kind of reached out to some of my colleagues in the field, and I think there are very minimal students that are taking this course right now. So we have a ways to go and where this looks like for that partnership. But if you have any knowledge, that would be helpful to us as well. But that's the rule change currently. And so we're here with some of the considerations that we should think about when we consider House Bill 5. Think about the variability in educational pathways. As you can see, there's a wide variety of different offerings for students, and so that it's no longer where you can just get a transcript. A student was under the recommended plan. You knew they took four credits in English and all the way up till English 4. You knew that they took the Algebra 2. Some of those requirements that were key indicators of the college readiness are no longer required of students. So just think about that variability and what that might look like when students come to your campus. Again, this is really just eligibility for admission versus admission requirements versus college readiness. Now, students could, again, that foundation high school program meets the eligibility technically, but what are the real requirements for admission into a college campus, and are the students really college ready? So those things you have to consider. It's not just a clear understanding any longer without, since that great educational options to the students. We also think about previous graduation plans and the rubric for admission. It's usually most institutions probably saw, okay, the student was under the recommended plan. We know that they're college ready and they've taken those courses. So thinking about those things on the intake side, the importance of transparency with admission requirements, and then understanding that this is still a work in progress. I'm sure after this first year, they're going to see that there are some changes that may need to happen, some things that might need to be tweaked or looked at or reviewed, and we know that this is an ongoing working document, obviously, work in progress.
I just wanted to add a couple of things. First of all, if you are a partnering institution with a school district, you're going to have the most current data and information, or access to information, in terms of the number of students that are enrolling in these courses. The only way we really formally know is once the exemptions begin to be reported by institutions of higher ed. And so that's still a little ways off. Also, because the school districts are required to offer these courses, but enrollment is optional for students. It's highly recommended for students, and the school districts have to talk to the parents and provide information to parents about the value of the course, but still enrollment is optional for high school students. And then I also wanted to mention that the three commissioners from the Workforce Commission, TEA, and the Coordinating Board recently met with a group of superintendents, and the superintendents, the K-12 world is still sort of voicing that there is an issue still of the requirement by many institutions of higher ed that specific math courses be taken by students in high school to be even considered for admissions. So we just wanted to let you know that that is something that is still of concern to the school districts, and that's specifically related around the specific math requirements.
Real quickly, just wanted to go over some things we've been doing here at the Coordinating Board around House Bill 5. We don't have a lot of authority, but we have been looking at collaborations and working with as many work groups as we're able to. We've worked with the Texas Association of Community Colleges and their convening groups that help develop specifically around that college preparatory course. They help develop those frameworks for English language arts and mathematics courses, as well as a standard MOU or example of an MOU that school districts can use and IHEs can use. They provided some resources there and some examples in case anyone wants to take a look at that. I know this, again, is a work in progress, so I don't think anything is set in stone just yet. So it's good to look at what else is out there in the different areas. And we've provided a link for you to access those, and possibly might get Dr. Cornelius to send that information out if necessary. But that is one of our partnerships that we've been working with, and we just want to let you know of those resources. The Coordinating Board has also developed a set of guidelines, pretty much some principles regarding how the college preparatory course should look, and some of the key points in there are things that are already happening from my understanding out in the field, but it's just our slight position of what we'd like to see in are considerations that you should think about in developing those college preparatory courses. Some of the main things are things like incorporating the college and career readiness success standards, college and career, the CCRS, basically, make sure those are integrated into the course. Also, our recommendation is that school districts and institutions of higher education utilize the TSI assessment. We understand not every school district can do that, but that is a recommendation as far as we think that's a good assessment to utilize in order to show college readiness. And so there are areas that are doing that for their students. I did want to let you know of some of the other work that's happening in the field with our avatar groups, their vertical alignment groups. Basically, we're providing funding to support the HB5 vertical alignment work. They're also looking at the development or working with and developing those college preparatory courses to make sure there's alignment again with the CCRS, and just kind of assessing what's out there in the field. I saw they're collecting data, basically a summary from each of their partners to see what the courses look like. So that's something that we'll be able to see. Again, it's just very preliminary information. They ask questions basically about what partnerships have been developed. They'll also ask who the target audience is for the course. We know it's recommended for 12th graders that haven't met college readiness, but other areas may feel differently and say we want all of our students to take the course. So that would be good to know. And they ask questions about the development of the course and how many students are enrolled. And I do know that there are students enrolled in the course this fall. So it's interesting to see that's already happening. There's also work with Pathways. They also are doing collaborations and alignment work. There's a little bit of alignment even between Pathways and Avatar. So that's good. If anything, this bill is really forcing collaborations. So that's a good thing for everyone to start talking to one another and through that whole pipeline. I did want to let you guys know that a couple of months ago, we did host, the coordinating board through our division hosted a parent impact summit regarding House Bill 5. There were counselors there. There were also parents and students. And we had the time to talk to them about what are some good ways to relay the information to parents and students. And we also informed them of the new curriculum requirements and shared the link of they all got hard copies. I didn't bring... Suzanne brought hers. They all got hard copies of the graduation toolkit, which was developed in partnership with the coordinating board, the Texas Workforce Commission, as well as the TEA. So this was a joint effort, and so those participants received a hard copy of that. And we provided this link for you also, so you have that. And this is just, again, what that looks like. And there's the link to it as well. So that is the end of our presentation. We know that you may have some questions or some discussion around this topic.
While you're thinking of questions, I just wanted to point something out. If you do have access to this, and there are no page numbers I see, but in the second to the last page, there are a number of really good resources, because as you can tell, as students pick endorsements, something very important is that they be availed of a lot of opportunities to explore a lot of careers and so forth. And that's got to happen early in elementary and in middle school, because at the beginning of their 9th grade year, they have to pick an endorsement. And I was at a session probably about 3 months ago, and Representative Ueac was speaking, and he said he anticipates, of course, possibly some changes may be considered in this next legislative session, but he also considers a challenge for this whole plan is a lack of informed counselors. And also, he thinks in 2 years, when a lot of these students who start in one endorsement path change endorsements, that there will be a greater need for more information and even more counselors at that point. But that having been said, they do have a couple of really good resources. These looks like they're sponsored by the Texas Workforce Commission, and I explored these a little bit, and these would be great if you have, by the way, identifying careers is not only a problem for ninth graders, but we know also for our freshmen, right? For those coming in, and even in some cases, some of our transfer students. So these are wonderful resources. There's a self-assessment. It also gives some real-time data about the jobs that are available and will be anticipated to have a lot of openings within the next 10 years. It gives sort of a mid-range salary, type, the types of money that students would make who are in that field. That's always very interesting. But again, resources I think that are going to be real important for students as they begin to make these considerations.
Another thing to note, and I don't know if it's of any importance, but I thought was pretty neat, is that if you click on this website or you go to TEA website to find this information, they've actually have the whole booklet there in PDF, but then they broke it out into sections. So if there's a relevant section just for one piece, you can actually just download that one piece. You'll see what I mean if you go to the page, but we found that some other groups thought that was a really good idea, because instead of having to download the entire thing, they could just download one section if they wanted to go to a working group meeting and talk about these are the things that we want to focus on today out of this booklet, instead of taking or lugging the whole thing around. So I thought that was interesting and something to share.
Are there questions?
I have a question. One of the concerns that I've heard about this transition is that with there will no longer be end of course exams for, say, like Algebra 2, which was one of the qualifying exemptions for TSI. So even students who take Algebra 2, we won't be able, if they don't have the SAT score, then they're going to have to take the TSI assessment.
School districts have the option to opt in to those two assessments, the English 3 and the Algebra 2, that have a college readiness standard starting next year. So, and then also we understand a few students were also given, use those assessments, and so they are still a rule. We don't know yet. We haven't heard yet whether school districts will choose to opt in again. There were some considerations of some concerns on the part of school districts in terms of how that fits in with their accountability systems. But we hope that that's what's going to happen, is school districts will opt back into those exams. But yes, the two exams that had the college readiness benchmarks are not at this time being offered.
Right. And which wave of entering students will this be next year, the year after?
The school districts can opt into offering again next year, but of course the final exams won't be administered until spring.
Right. Okay.
Sorry, can you go back to the rule change for 4.54? So I wanted to make sure I understood what you were saying. So these college prep courses that are being delivered by the school districts, if we want to accept somebody else's from another region, we do an MOU with a higher ed institution, not with the school districts that are delivering it?
Right, that's correct. Go ahead.
So really, there's two MOUs involved with this whole rule. The first MOU is between the institution of higher ed and the local school district, and that's in developing the course, the curriculum, what successful completion means, and so forth. And that exemption for a student who successfully completes is automatic at that partnering institution for 1 year. Now, if Houston Community College and Amarillo College, they saw each other, they saw the course, the curriculum, they agree with it, they like it, then those two institutions of higher ed can engage in a second memorandum of understanding between the two institutions of higher ed to accept each other's exemption or to accept one or the other.
So we're accepting the exemption from the other institution, not the college prep course, since they're not delivering the college prep course.
Right. The college prep course is a high school course, right. So you wouldn't be accepting a high school course anyway, right. I don't think. So.
and this may sound like deja vu, but I'm going to go back to transcript, because where we can anticipate problems initially would be if one institution transcribes TSI exempt, unless it is coded in such a way that we understand how that student became TSI exempt. How will we know? And then also, in those cases where they are TSI exempt by means of the course, which is essentially for 1 year, will that also be transcribed so we will know that they are TSI exempt only if we receive it by a certain date?
Those are good points, and as Dr. Julie Eklund, our colleague in Planning and Accountability, notes, that the coordinating board is really not involved with transcripting and how institutions choose to include information on the transcript. But yes, those are certainly very important questions to consider.
This is another one for you, Reinhold, to take the TACRO.
I know if TACRO is TACRO involved with
transcripting
high school.
Well, they're the ones transcripting the college level, and I think you're talking about is because what my understanding is, as MCC, for instance, accepts something from Waco High, and this student is now TSI exempt, and wants to transfer to Texas Women's. How does Texas Women's know how they became TSI exempt? That's a records thing. Just asking.
Okay, I think the student who graduates has 1 year and who successfully completed the college prep course, they have 1 year from the date of their graduation to use that exemption or present that exemption at an institution of higher ed. Once they do that, that exemption is in place, and I don't think that can be rescinded at that time. Yes, and so how that exemption got there, I think, may not be relevant.
Well, it would be relevant for those, if we were to say that I only wanted to accept those from school districts with which I had an MOU, I wouldn't know how that TSI exemption was placed on there. They're two different issues. I see what you're saying about the time frame. And yes, I see that. You're right. Once it is down, it would be ad infinitum. But I wouldn't know the source of it. So I wouldn't know whether to question whether it came via a TSIA score or whether it came via an MOU with an individual district.
Wouldn't the student have to take a college level course in that area within that year, or else then that exemption would be up?
No, that exemption is...
But it only lasts for 1 year.
No, for the student to be able to present that exemption and use it, if you will, at an institution of higher ed. But once they have presented it, and if it's within that year, my understanding is that exemption is then good.
But they're not using it unless they take a college level course, right? That's how they use the exemption. I can take my college level math course because I'm showing you that I'm exempt, and if I don't take it within the year, I can't show you I'm exempt.
Once a student is exempt, the student is not required to immediately take a college credit course in that subject area within a certain time for that exemption to remain valid. Once that student has been deemed exempt, that exemption is there forever, if you will. And if a student is not required to take a college credit course in that subject area immediately to hold the validity of that exemption.
Okay, I'm going to have a really hard time explaining that when I go back. So looking at the rule language, it says the student is exempt for 12 months with respect to the content area of the course. It doesn't say they have till for 12 months to present their exemption. It says they're exempt for 12 months. So how do I explain it to my colleagues so that I can really get us all on the same page?
Rex, you want to come up here and...
I'm not
I'm not sure. I sat in on the negotiated rulemaking, and I want to say that this was put in there in the event that a student took a break, a semester off for those students. So if they took a break off and they came in the spring, then they still had that exemption available to them. So I think you're saying two different things, really.
Yeah. Once that exemption has been accepted, because it was presented within 12 months of high school graduation, of the student's high school graduation, once that exemption is accepted by that institution, that exemption remains an exemption forever. The student is then exempt in that related subject area. Well, the year is that the student who graduated from high school, they don't immediately go to college right away. Some take off a semester, so they do have a year to go to, they graduate from high school, maybe they go to work, maybe they do an overseas trip or something, so they have 1 year from the date of graduation to take that exemption that they earned based on the successful completion of that college credit course back to that partnering institution of higher ed. Remember, it's only the partnering institution of higher ed. It's not any other. And so that student takes that exemption, and then the partnering institution of higher ed can verify, yes, you were, part of that, or whatever they need to do. Yes, we accept that exemption. And then once that exemption is transcripted, because exemptions have to, by rule, be transcripted as soon as feasible, that exemption is, that student is exempt and does not have to do anything else to hold the validity of that exemption. Does not have to take a college credit course right away, doesn't have to do anything else.
It's an expiration date on the coupon.
I understand all of that, but I know that when my colleagues see this rule, they're not going to believe me because the rule language does not appear to suggest that.
Another factor is that there are other exemptions for TSI requirements that have no time limit. Right? You're exempt because of your score on something, and then it lasts as long as you live. So what is the meaning of this temporal thing?
Actually, like SAT and ACT exemptions, those also have expiration.
Right, but they're much longer.
Yeah, they're much longer. I think what the concern was here, and Rex chime in, we were in that negotiated rule. What were the concerns? They didn't want to make it longer than 12 months. In fact, there was actually a little bit of a debate to make it, that the student had to use it immediately, like that very next fall semester, and then they wanted to give a little bit longer time period.
But an exemption, it sounds like it's an admission requirement. You can't get into higher ed without the exemption, but it's not an admission issue. So what does it mean that I'm exempt?
That means that you have, on the basis of successful completion of the course, have met a certain level of mastery and have demonstrated college readiness, and that definition, 80% likelihood of getting a passing course and an entry-level credit course in that subject area deems you college ready.
It's very confusing for that to be so different from the exemption you get by taking Algebra 2 and getting a star score.
Might make it even more confusing, or maybe clarify more, is a student comes from Waco High, takes the college prep course, has an MOU with us, and they're exempt, but they're only exempt at McLennan, and they have a year to take a course with McLennan or anybody else that McLennan has a separate MOU with at the time. Is that correct?
No, that they don't have a year to do anything. They can take forever to take the course.
But it has to be at McLennan.
They have a year to go to McLennan after they graduate from high school.
And
they
McLennan transcripts are text exempt. So then when they apply to UT Austin, the McLennan transcript will say that they're TSI complete, correct? But it has to be the college that they have the MOU with.
Yes.
That's correct.
But the other institution won't know.
Correct.
Right. I see. So again, that's something those entities and organizations that work with institutions of higher ed in terms of transcripting and how to transcript I think that would be a great topic to bring up.
And one last point, I think because of that ambiguity, I think that's why many of the college prep courses are utilizing the TSIA as a culminating activity.
Right.
Because if they have successfully completed the TSIA, then you don't have that issue about transferability to another institution.
Right, and then it's no longer really a college prep exemption. Then you've earned the TSI exemption.
I mean, just to add a little bit of history to the decision as to why this was 12 months, I think when the committee convened, the negotiated rule committee convened, they actually had an issue with saying we're going to extend this if they didn't really understand the rigor of this course. Because I mentioned it's locally developed, it could look very different at another partnership. And so they felt comfortable with allowing a reasonable time frame within the 12 months. And then there was also, I want to say, if my memory serves me correctly, discussion about those students that do have a lapse in going to college if they took, study abroad or, went off to do work or started in the spring. They at least have those, or started in the summer of the following year, they at least have that 12 months of an exemption period. So I think that's what the issues were, and that why it's twofold almost. But because there was a lengthy discussion about making it longer and to align with the other expiration times with the other assessments. However, the committee felt this was a manageable time frame.
Another observation from the field, it's amazing how we in higher education know more about this than the superintendents do in the school systems. I just want to pass it on. Every time I stand up to talk to the ISDs, they look at me blankly going, what's House Bill 5?
Oh, my goodness.
And I think that may be because the exemption is valid at your institution, and you're the institution that's going to have to serve these students who will then come in on the first day and come to your Math 1314 class or English 1301 and, be prepared. Right? So, Dr. Lerner, if I understand correctly, so you've got a student who came in within the 12-month period, and it was your partnering institution, presented the information, you granted the exemption, you transcripted it because that's what the rule says. You have to transcript it right away. And then the student changes his or her mind and transfers to another institution. That exemption is on the transcript, but that receiving institution had no say whatsoever in how that student got, in other words, in that locally developed course, especially if there is no MOU between those two institutions. That's a good point.
And this would be especially true, if, let's say, a student from McAllen High School, we developed with McAllen High School, they come to SEC, they provide their exemption for English 1301, but the first semester they take their history class, government class, they don't take 1301. Second semester they take off for a semester, and then that next fall they go to UTRGV. And of course, it's transcripted. They did take a course, so they are requesting a transcript. It's not like they never came to SGC. They came and took a course, just wasn't the one for that exemption. And then that receiving institution is getting a transcript with that posted.
And technically, the courses are supposed to be reading and writing, not necessarily for English 1301. So they're also supposed to prepare you for history and government and psychology, sociology, and those other entry-level reading and or writing intensive courses. But yes, I see your point there.
Which is a good general example. It's actually not for our region, though, because we have a region-wide MOU. So we're good.
Right, Rio Grande, RGV? Yes. I think you have 35 school districts and one MOU. 5 institutions of higher ed, right. So, you guys are good.
Thank you, Rex.
Not everybody was supposed to do it.
Are there other questions or comments? I'm hoping you will come back and give us a more in-depth update as things progress and, you know, things get a little further down the road, especially next year as high school systems tend to opt into this and we start preparing to receive some of these students into our programs. I think it would be very helpful. And so, thank you.
That's not
We want to do this thing on the fields of study. While we have Dr. Peebles here, we had held back. We held back on Agenda 3, Item 3, and then we held back on Agenda Item 3F until Dr. Peebles was here to join us, and so he is here now. And so if you would talk to us about fields of study and programs of study.
Okay. Well, you actually held back on those items because I was at another meeting about fields of study. So this topic I could actually shed some light on. I don't know what to tell you about all these exemptions and that kind of stuff. I mean, I find it a little puzzling myself. I do know that part of the reason for the 12 months was that the law required us to do something. Okay? But there was real concern about whether that something would actually be effective or not in terms of preparing students. So the 12-month exemption was designed in part to try to give some time period of which we could go ahead and do something in keeping with the law, but also try to, at the same time, set up some kind of mechanism where we could get some feedback on this in the future and determine whether this really worked or not. Because if you think about what you're doing there, you're essentially taking students who have either not taken the requisite English and math courses in high school, or they have taken those courses and not passed them in some sense. And then you're going to use a one-semester course to try to prepare them for college. And so, at least in my own mind, there's a lot of question about whether that's really the appropriate way to do that, or whether it's going to be an effective way to do that. So part of that 12 months was somewhat of a compromise in terms of having, as Larry pointed out, a lot of exemptions are lifetime exemptions. I mean, the military exemptions are good forever. Others do have some time limit, but they're a lot longer than a year. And and part of that is the military exemption is lifetime because that's a political consideration. And the others have an exemption on them based on sort of the lifetime of your ability to retain knowledge, which we do a lot of things with degree programs based on those same kind of considerations, so it all makes sense. So the 12 months was a way to try to get some information, hopefully get some information out of this and then revisit the issue if necessary. So I guess we'll see what happens. Okay, fields of study and programs of study. Most of you are aware that fields of study are already in statute, and they're typically 12 to 18 semester credit hours of lower division work that can then be not only transferred but also are required by law to be applied to a degree program in the areas that they're developed. But they're not very widely used, and a lot of that has to do, frankly, probably with the age of these things. Some of them are 10 years or more older now. And as we all know, departments on a fairly regular basis look at their curriculum of their degree programs and make adjustments to it based on the needs of students, based on the market needs of wherever their students are going, whether they be a graduate school or professional school or the workplace. They make curriculum changes based on changes that have happened within the field itself. What kind of innovations or changes or new knowledge has been gained in those fields. So curriculum is constantly changing, and the fields of study have not, by and large. So what we have done is we have asked the legislature for, in the spirit of solving all problems, we've asked for more money. Okay. So actually we've asked for more money so that we can actually get the staff to try to put these things on a systematic basis. And one afternoon I did a little rough analysis of degree programs in the state of Texas. And actually what I did was I just got out a UT Austin catalog and a Texas A&M College Station catalog, and I went down through there and I tried to count up all the bachelor's degree programs they had. And I tried not to duplicate where you could get a BA or a BS degree in the same field. So I tried to count, specific fields as best I could. And what I came up with was that UT Austin had 132, and Texas A&M College Station had 133. So Larry, y'all need to propose 2 more to get to claim the number 1. Or what might actually serve students better is if we could get A&M to drop 1. So I just decided I ought to take just some sort of rough analysis of this to see what we were up against. Well, of course, some of those are going to be confined to an institution or a couple of institutions, and so a field of study may not even be worth the time and effort, so to speak, because it's already there in some sense. But a lot of those, every institution in Texas offers some of those degrees, and we all know that the issues that arise with transfer and that kind of thing. So, one of the ways to ameliorate this that the legislature came up with was the field of study legislation, which is designed so that a student could take a certain number of semester credit hours at the lower division level and then transfer them and have them applied to a major at any other public institution in Texas. And when they were first done, I think there's 8 of them that or so that are currently on the books. And when they were first adopted, I think they were actually, sort of fairly well used, but they've fallen into disuse. And so what we're going to try to pursue is actually looking at those and creating some systematic way of creating more, but also making sure that we review on a timely basis. And we use the same kind of mechanism that was used before, and that is to bring in committees of faculty, both in 2-year institutions and 4-year institutions, in that subject area, the people who know and understand the subject matter, and then can actually tell us what kind of lower division courses ought to be a part of the major, and reach some agreement on that. And so what we've asked for really is additional money to fund the staff for that. If you think about 132, then maybe there's only 100 there that need to be looked at and analyzed. But if you want to do 100 every 5 years, that's 20 degree programs every year. They're going to need to meet at least a couple of times. So, you're going to need somebody full time just to manage the paperwork with regard to the logistics of all of that, of rounding up the committee members. Because that also means if you're going to do 20 a year, you need 20 different committees to do this as well. So the logistics alone are somewhat daunting of actually trying to do this in a systematic way. So that's the reason for the legislative request. The statutory authority already exists for fields of study, and that's to facilitate, again, 2 to 4 year transfer primarily. But I think it's even more important when you have students who go to 2 and then to a 4 and then back to a 2, or they're going to a 2 and a 4 at the same time. One of our new members of the coordinating board related the other day that when she got her degree, she cobbled her bachelor's degree together from 4 different institutions, I think it was, 3 of which she attended at the same time at one point. And so, it's not unusual for students to do those kinds of things. And so in the interest of trying to serve them well and try to do something about their time degree and just the sheer cost to them of an education, then we need to try to facilitate transfer as much as we can, while at the same time trying to honor institutional culture and differences. And I think most of that can be typically is done at the upper division level. So these things are targeted to lower division courses that tend to be much more in common across fields. And then programs of study are aimed at sort of doing the same thing, but this is for career and technical education. And this is really more focused on secondary to post-secondary or high school to college. This has I guess House Bill 5 kind of affords some opportunity to really work with high schools on this to try to create some seamless transitions. And one of the things that I discovered shortly before coming to the coordinating board, and has since been kind of borne out by other anecdotal evidence, I must admit, purely, and that is that it's probably easier for a student to transfer from, institution A and go across Texas to institution B and transfer in a chemistry or a history program than it is for a student to go from institution A and go across Texas to institution B and try to transfer in a welding program or a nursing program. My own experience is that it was almost impossible for a student to transfer across two counties, okay, from one institution to another institution that were 20 miles apart in a nursing program. And the best advice I could give the student was, you just stay where you are and finish. Because if you come to my institution, you're going to have to essentially start over. And, having lost a year in a 2-year program didn't make a whole lot of sense to me then, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me now. But the issue was sequencing. Some stuff is in semester 1 here, but it's in semester 2 there, those kind of issues. So programs of study are designed to try to facilitate that, but also tap into House Bill 5's requirements that every ISD offer at least one career and technical education endorsement, and then try to provide some seamless transition for students to go from high school to college without having to repeat credit in career and technical education credit. And so, and by the way, there are 125 identified programs of study out there. So if you want to bring some, kind of systematic way of looking at those, then you're also looking at doing 20 or 25 a year and all the logistics involved in that. But again, those are things that also need to be periodically looked at and reviewed as well. And so what we're going to be asking from the field, and I hope to also use the expertise on this committee as well, is, as we kind of move into this, is to get some sense from folks about, we can easily find out, who's got who's majoring in the most stuff. We know that business is going to be at the top of the heap and others and so forth. And so it's fairly easy to find out how many people are majoring in each field. And so that those need to be looked at. It's a little more difficult to determine which fields are actually causing problems for students in terms of transfer. And so we also want to look at those. We also need to put them at the sort of the top of the list as well to try to see what can be done about making those kinds of transitions easier. And I think this is, this committee could be invaluable to us in helping to figure out what those areas are, because you've got experience from our own institutions, or you know who to talk to there to find out what programs cause the most trouble for transfer, both those transferring to places and then those transferring in, and the problems run on both sides, by the way. And the meeting I just came from, the Texas Success Center has sort of contracted, I guess, if you will, with the Bush School for one of their master's programs. They do a capstone course, and they actually do a project-based capstone. And so one of the things they're going to do is take a really hard look at fields of study. So don't be surprised if I give them some of your names to contact to talk about some of these issues, and really help them understand what the problems are, where the issues are at with these things. And they're going to be primarily looking at fields of study, but we're also going to rely on this group and other entities to help us with the programs of study too, and look at those that are most problematic or the most popular, the ones that students are going into the most. And at one time it was probably pretty much the case that a student who went into career and technical education, they started an institution for a certificate or an associate of applied science degree. They tended to stay there to finish, and they tended to stay in that area to work. And so one of the things that's happened is that we have a lot of programs that are called the same thing in different places, but they may be very different because they've tried to tailor themselves so much to local workforce needs. But we also know that there's a lot more mobility now than there used to be. And so anything we can do to try to help with that. And again, this is about somewhat time to degree, but also the cost as well. So we'll be looking to you guys to provide some input and help us with a lot of your wisdom and advice on what we need to be looking at and when. So, and I'll leave it at that and then answer or try to answer any questions you might have about it. One thing about programs of study, we intend to try to involve both secondary and post-secondary faculty in these things, but also business and industry as well.
Questions or comments?
Rex, earlier today, before you came, we were talking about reverse transfer, and a discussion came up about the fact that sometimes students suffered in the transfer process by bringing in early level courses, sometimes core courses, sometimes not, that weren't appropriately aligned to the major they ended up in. So I'm wondering whether that's being addressed in the field of study as well. I know that we've discussed here previously and had a subcommittee with recommendations about recommending particular core course selections in the various component areas for students headed in particular toward particular kinds of majors. But is that also relevant for this field of study?
Well, I must admit I hadn't thought about it in connection with field of study, but it certainly could be appropriate to that. To once a field of study is outlined with that 12 to 18 hours. And one other thing to keep in mind about this, the fields of study are designed to be that 12 to 18 semester credit hours of lower division work beyond the core curriculum. But it's also an excellent point that, if you're going to be a geology major, you probably should take geology in the core, not biology necessarily. And that's probably not the best example I could use of this. But if you're going to be a psychology major, then maybe your other social and behavioral science ought to be intro to sociology rather than, say, cultural anthropology or something. So there are ways to align that with degree programs as well. And it's probably something worthy to think about as the field of study is developed, and there may also be recommendations that go along with that about what core courses would be suitable for that particular major. Because we have, I know Ueac before did discuss at some length about this whole idea of creating sort of recommended cores for at least broad areas. Like if you want to be a physical science major, what should your core courses look like? If you want to be an engineering major, if you want to be a history major, and that kind of stuff. So that is certainly something to think about.
Rex, are all the field of studies 18 credits or less? Because I've just been told something and I haven't looked it up yet. And what was asked was that there are a couple of field of studies that I was told are longer than 18 credits, and that people can get permission to shorten their core in those instances, whether it's engineering or music. I think those are example of two, and so have less of a core and still get an associate's degree and more courses in the field of study. But I'm not sure if I'm understanding that correctly.
That is correct. There is a mechanism allowed for particularly those areas that, due to the sequencing of courses and the way that you have to take prerequisites. I mean, music is one of those areas where there are some things that you have to take piano 1 before 2 and 2 before 3 and 3 before 4. It's not like some areas where you can kind of mix and match that kind of stuff. And so there are some areas, music is one of them, where the sequence matters as much as the courses themselves do. And so there is a mechanism that provides for, now you got to be careful, you don't shorten the core. You still have to take 42 hours of core. The question is, where do you take it at? And what those allow you to do is to have an associate's degree that's built around a less than 42-hour core, but then the rest, and say that's 30 hours then of core courses, and then you would have 30 hours of music courses or other required courses for music that would be a part of that. So I think one of the things, I've gotten a lot of questions about music in the last month or so, and so I think it seems to me that maybe one of the first ones we might look at and probably this year's music for that very reason. And any others that y'all could think of that have become particularly problematic. But there is a mechanism for doing that, and they're sometimes called inverse degrees. But, essentially the idea is if you take the 42-hour core as a part of an associate's degree, and then you just take 18 hours in music, by the time you transfer, you're probably going to have another semester or another year to get out because of the sequencing and the way it works out. And so, yeah. And if there's any other area like that, I mean, engineering is another one where that's done too. So there's more. Music is not the only one. So.
Computer science is another one.
Yeah, and computer science is one.
How about the compacts? To me, the compacts seem, the engineering compacts, some of the work that was done, I think it was the Turing community. It seemed like that would seem to be pretty productive work, and even to the point that wondering how that would play with the fields of study. Are you thinking about that as well, where you have the 4 and the 2 years come together and agree, and this is the way we're going to teach the course, and there's no argument or discussion about how that transfers? Yeah,
actually, we think that may be one of those places where that's the low-hanging fruit. We can grab or build on those compacts. The distinction is two things. One is they're voluntary compacts, and the other is that if you really think about what the compacts did, they're list of courses. Now, it is true that through the tuning process, there was agreement reached between 2- and 4-year institutions about what those courses should look like, what the outcomes should be, which is a great thing in and of itself. But they're also just lists of courses that you can take and then apply. And so the field of study would actually add a little teeth to that. But we do think that that's one of those places where it might be easy to and actually bring some of the same people back that worked on those endeavors. And get them back rather quickly and do something with it. And the more I look at engineering, the more, and there's at least one person in the state working on this already, but it seems to me that may be one of those areas where you really only need one. I mean, you may just need a field of study for engineering. Because the lower division stuff, there's a lot of commonality regardless of which field of engineering you go into. But we'd have to really closely look at that and make sure that actually makes sense. So. But yeah, it's a good
question. Reginald Bell. You're all on first name basis, and I'm new here, so can you let me hear your name one more time?
Oh, my name is Rex Peebles.
Peebles. I'm Reginald Bell. My question is, is the overriding philosophy where a problematic field of study concerned, is it a resource dependency philosophy or is it a revenue generating philosophy? How does a field of study become problematic?
Well, I think it becomes problematic because students can't transfer their courses and have them applied to the major. I mean, that's what makes it problematic. And as a result of that, then students wind up taking more courses. And they oftentimes wind up repeating courses that they may have already taken. And that's where it becomes a resource issue because it costs the students more. It costs the state more because we're paying contact hour reimbursement and credit hour reimbursement for both of those. Up to 167 hours or whatever it is.
But at the same time, in certain fields like engineering or computer science or music, you have to, if you follow the standard pattern of taking core and then doing your 18 hours, engineering, you need to be taking engineering your first semester and getting as much of that engineering. There's a sequence of courses, plus the idea of mixing courses. So you don't take all your, you don't take your last semester 19 hours of engineering courses. You can actually interspace different courses in there. So if we follow the pattern we have for the 2-year colleges, we're pushing core and then we're putting students out of sequence with the 4 years. By allowing us to use a field of study where they'll accept this, they can complete the core throughout the 4-year, at the same time it's keep in sequence with the 4 years are doing.
But do you think that would be problematic for some of the really small schools, like say a Wiley College or a Jarvis Christian, where they have maybe 4 people teaching in the management area and maybe 3 people in finance and accounting, where courses have to be necessarily staggered because you just don't have the person power to offer the courses on not only an annual basis, but sometimes you can only offer a course every other year at some schools because of the shortfall in budgets.
Offhand, I don't know. I'd have to think that one through a little bit more. I mean, I know that, for example, and this is particularly true in workforce education, where the critical mass of students isn't there always, and by the same token, you're relegated to offering the course only once per year, or maybe even once every 2 years, and maybe one time in a 2-year program. And even sometimes that's not uncommon at the upper division level, for example, where a course may be only offered once a year, every 2 years. But offhand, I'm not sure how that would impact. But let me think about that some more, and that may be something that we need to kind of keep in mind as we go along. And if you want, we can talk some more about that offline sometime. Okay.
Other questions or comments?
Well, I do have one more comment. I think if the philosophy is that most degree programs should be vocational in nature, meaning that at the end of a program there should be a job or an opportunity for a job, I think we need to go back more to the Aristotelian approach, whereby sometimes you pursue wisdom because you have a love of wisdom, or a love, at least the pursuit of wisdom. And some majors are necessarily small because they're unpopular, but that doesn't mean that the rigor in the curriculum is not there. My undergrad was in English literature, and we may have had 15 majors, but that degree has served me better than any degree, my Master's of Business Administration, and even the PhD that is a research degree. But it's those questions like, what is the dueling plot or the dueling themes in Shakespeare's Macbeth, and what does the recurring theme of the Stygian witches have to do with the downfall of Macbeth and the blood on her? And they give you these multifolded questions that is connected by semicolons, and by the time you finish, it's a semester long. But when you get into the work of what a PhD researcher does, is asking very similar questions, but more systematically, and you're creating hypotheses based on theories, and you're building theory by testing hypotheses. So some areas of study, in my opinion, are so critical to the good foundation of a thinking person that if the goal of eliminating problematic programs is spearheaded by the notion that every degree should lead to a vocation or a job, I think that's wrong-minded thinking. That's my comment. That's not a question. Thank you.
I would agree with you, but I don't know that, I don't believe, and I certainly don't intend for those two questions, for the question of the validity of a degree to ever be connected to whether it has a field of study or not. Because I think those can be and ought to be two entirely different issues.
Unfortunately, that's the way most of the people that I come across think. And you hear it all the time when parents are talking to their children about what major to select. I just had it last night in a conversation. I stayed at the La Quinta Inn, or La Quinta, and I was talking to a guy who was talking about sending his child to Texas Christian University, and we started talking about majors, and his daughter wanted to major in some art field, and he was protesting that she should not do that. And I'm like, well, why shouldn't she do that? What's wrong with majoring? Well, how is she going to find a job? So I think most people equate, if they have to spend money on tuition for a child, then that child should major in something that they deem to be associated with a career, and a bonus is a high-paying career.
Well, I certainly want my kids to support me in my old age. I think that's the least they can do after all I've done for them, right? But again, I mean, I think there are certainly philosophical discussions, and in fact, we've had many of them at the coordinating board, and a lot of the discussion around the next strategic plan for higher education in Texas revolves around some of these issues of, should we be in the business of preparing a person for a job? or should we be trying to educate them for some broader purposes? And so while I don't disagree with any of that, I mean, I still don't think any of that necessarily addresses the issue of whether there should be a field of study for art history or not, and what should be the content of that field of study. So that's.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you for the information. Well, if I am correct, that brings us to agenda item 6, which is essentially plotting our course for the rest of the academic year and for our next meeting. We do already have a task coming out of our meeting, and that relates to the reverse transfer and trying to address, hopefully in collaboration with TACRO, some processes or other types of strategies that might facilitate the reverse transfer process. Are there other issues that are important to people in the room that you would like to bring forward for consideration by the group this year?
I think in our materials at the back, there's a report from the subcommittee.
Yes. And Reinhold, can you give us a little summary of this?
Yes, this is very new. Christine Croyle volunteered last meeting to take the report about 60 semester credit hours and make it into a resource for embedded academic skills in course offerings. And so she's sent me her draft, and that is printed there. So that is something you could pick up and work on to finalize it or to make use of that.
So in the last meeting, in the previous draft we looked at, there was a lot more mixing of the learning framework class, some of the TSI developmental ed issues, and academic skills. I just separated them some and focused more on the academic skills.
Reinhold, are we able to take action on this item at this meeting, or does this need to be published as an agenda item before this group can take formal action?
You can take actions on this agenda item, but the way it is phrased, it's called consideration of future work and next meeting date, so I don't think that you can actually act on this draft, and it just came in after we made the agenda.
Well, I might suggest, are there one or two individuals, you had people work with you on this, is that correct?
Van reviewed it as well.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I should have put your name on there too.
There's nothing earth-shattering in it, and honestly, as I was looking at it, I thought, the coordinating board already does these things. But I do like the approach, but it is something that the coordinating board already supports. So I'm not sure whether or not it needs action, actually.
Shall we put it on the agenda for the spring meeting for review? It could be just a resource that is helpful for others, and so I would suggest that perhaps we just revisit it when we get back together again next semester. Are there other topics that people would like to discuss in greater depth when we get together?
Given the HB5 complexity, I'd love to have a regular update on HB5.
It sounds like there are pockets of activity underway with regard to these MOUs between regional schools and some of the local high schools, and even within, like it sounds like in the Rio Grande Valley, you've got quite a coordinated effort to have collaboration. Is there benefit in having somebody come and present what's going on in their area as food for thought for other programs who are dealing with this same issue?
We're doing one this year at Amarillo. We have a class that we're working with the high schools building, and they're teaching it as we build it. So they're actually teaching it this year.
Oh, and I think that's very, I wasn't thinking about that, but I think just what the nature of the particular college skills class might look like.
Well, that's what we're teaching.
Yeah.
So we've got the MOUs already set up, and we've set them up for there's 4 major schools in Amarillo, and then we've got some surrounding areas we're writing MOUs with now. And then we're developing the tests and the skills, and they're teaching it, but we're setting the criteria and the topics and things like that. So we're doing that right now, if that helps any.
Yeah.
And they're teaching it this year. So we'll get their students next summer and fall.
Yeah.
We have the same thing.
Is that helpful to talk about this, or a few nods around the room?
If anybody wants to know, email me and I can tell you how it's going for us.
I think it could actually be informative for those of us who are from 4-year schools, just to know what these things look like and what students might be experiencing as they matriculate into our institutions. And so I think that might be an interesting thing to just find out a little bit more about. I guess a question for those of you who are dealing with the 60 credit hour reporting that's coming due here in the end of October. Is it worthwhile to revisit just kind of after the fact, after the reports have gone in, to see how things went and whether there are perhaps a little recommendations, tips and tricks types of things for consideration as we move further into that?
We will definitely have a Corning Board update about that by that time.
I think that could be very helpful. Anything else? Larry?
So I looked at the summary of notes from the last meeting, and just what we said that we thought we might list things we would look at. And one thing, the number of the things we've dealt with today, so I think that's good. But actually, the first item that was listed in that was thinking about possible legislative changes to the core curriculum. And I haven't heard a peep about that. I know that was a popular item a couple of years ago, and I don't know whether we should be thinking about that or not. You remember that last big overhaul that we did, we said we're going to stay within the bounds of the legislative requirements and just redefine elements that are listed. But there was some sense earlier that there might also be thought that the legislative mandate might be adjusted as well for the number of hours, total hours, the number of hours in areas and things like that. So I don't know whether that's still on the table or not. It might be fun to talk about.
Response from our coordinating board representatives.
Well, if you want to go there, it's certainly timely to do it 2 years before the session. So.
Yeah, I think actually I might have been the one that suggested that at the last Ueac meeting. And on a personal note about that, the more I've thought about it, the more I think it might be at least worthwhile to have the conversation. I mean, Larry and I were on Ueac together when this first came up, and there was a lot of discussion then about a legislative change to the number of hours, or at least to the, maybe not the number of hours, but the sort of the makeup of it, if you will, or both of those issues. And I reminded myself at the time that, I mean, years ago, institutions had to turn in a report about the core, and they also asked for what we actually thought about it in our recommendations. And I remember that at the time, I actually recommended that the core be reduced to no more than 39 semester credit hours. And I've since decided that we could even go lower than that if we wanted to. But I've also thought about this issue because it's come up with some institutions about having a split between lower division and upper division core. And I think there's a discussion worth having, I think, and I think this group is where that discussion ought to take place initially about, is there some sense in having 3 or 6 hours of a 42-hour core that's really devoted to upper division work and maybe a capstone course of some kind or something like that. Because, part of, the way it's set up now is we tend to think of, and students do too, that they get that core curriculum out of the way and they're done with general education. And then they can do something important after that. And I think you alluded to this in your comments, is that quite often that general education may very well be the most important thing they take away from that. And so, and may have much more long-lasting effects than any specific thing they learn about any specific subject. And so, so I think it may be worth that conversation. At the time, the Ueac kind of decided that there probably wasn't much sentiment at the time for legislative change, and so we decided to work within the legal parameters that we had in statute at the time. But Ronald is also right. If you want to try to affect some legislative change, then now spring would be the time just to begin that discussion, to start getting all that lined up for legislative session after next. In that sense, because one of the things I have learned here is that stuff, while you're making sausage, it takes a long time to make the sausage. Okay, so, right. But I do think if y'all are interested in it, I do think that would be a discussion that might be worth having, and then get some feel for whether there's really any sentiment out there to do something like that, and if not, then that's fine. And if there is, then what shape would that take, and how would we approach it? So.
Well, why don't we put that on our agenda for the spring and kind of recircle, get the feel of the group about how we're feeling about the core. And we'll have lived with it for a year or coming close to a year by the time we get to that discussion. And so we'll have a better sense of how that plays out on our campuses.
And could a corollary to that be a discussion of core assessment?
Certainly.
Because we're at that point now, and actually what Dr. Peeble is mentioning about an upper division course, that really plays into, I know some institutions were looking at having an upper division capstone kind of course to assist them in the assessment process. So those two things sort of go together.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Well, if there are no other suggested topics for the spring meeting, perhaps we can talk about the proposed date for the spring meeting. Reinhold had suggested April 14th, and I think it's because that date falls well between other coordinating board meetings, and so he sent me the details, and I can't remember off the top of my head, so I'm going to... It's a Tuesday? I'm thinking I must have the date wrong.
It's a Tuesday, yes.
It's a Tuesday.
The way we picked that date, we thought it would be better to pick a date and run with it. We tried to avoid spring break, which is much earlier, but we also try to avoid Easter and other religious Passover. That's a 2-week period, and we would like to. We thought we would go between the cause meeting and the board meeting, so that gives us a good chance to update you on what is going on with the board. And so we would put it between cause and board meeting, and then this meeting's in preparation for the July cause board meeting, because that would be the meeting where you present to the board what you'd like to present to them. That's how we picked April 14th. It could also be another date. If for example, you know about a professional conference we don't know at that date, then many of you go to, then we certainly will.
Is there sentiment about a Tuesday versus a Friday? So, some of you, I know, travel far further than some of the rest of us, and so I think for those of you who have to...
Well, traffic
Fridays
is better.
are easier.
Yeah, Fridays are easier. I had to drive from Houston, so traffic was really good for me on Thursday evening.
So we're hearing Friday if we can make it work? Okay. Reinald, I'll ask you and some of the other staff here at the coordinating board to look at a couple of targets then as potential alternates to the 14th. And
okay.
We'll go from there. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other items for the group? Well, thank you. I think we have had some great discussions today, and I really look forward to seeing y'all back again in the spring sometime.
Thank you.